Chapter 295. Lin Xiao didn't sit for long before they exited the space. Because everything was almost ready, they could continue their journey. After starving for a few days, the Fengting hunting team drank a bowl of hot porridge. Their essence chi had recovered significantly, and they looked much more spirited. During this period, only Lin Xiao and Long Qingying were outside. Lin Wenwen and Cheng Wangshua's mother didn't come out of the car. When Chen Yuding and the others saw Lin Hao and the others put the porridge in the car, they knew there were still people in the car. Get in the car, get in the car. Check the car and get ready to go. Lin Feng shouted to the others. After getting on the chariots, the two chariots headed toward Sea City. Lin Xiao and Long Qingying still sat on the roof of the car under the sun. Although Lin Xiao was very hot, she didn't enter the car because she needed to sit on the roof to deter the zombies around. It was already October, and although it was hot during the day, she didn't enter the car. But at night, there was the coolness of autumn. Of course, the autumn night after the apocalypse would be very cold, but there was a lot of dust on the road. When the sun set, they entered Yuhang district. Along the way, Chen Yuding and Lu Chongfeng found something strange. They didn't see any zombies. Why was that? They noticed this phenomenon in the morning, but because they were on the highway or in the suburbs, they didn't pay much attention to it. But when they reached the center of Hangzhou, it was a zombie city with a dense number of zombies. In the end, they managed to pass through without any danger. Lin Feng drove around the city because there were many people in the city and the buildings were dense. So there were a lot of abandoned cars, stones, and large objects on the road, blocking the way. Because they were in a hurry, Lin Feng didn't look for a safe place to spend the night. With Lin Xiao and Qiu Lily by his side, he would be safe no matter where he went. Finally, when it was dark, Lin Feng found an entertainment club. There were hotel rooms, bars, foot massage, sauna, billiards, and all kinds of other entertainment places. After Lin Feng stopped the car, the zombies in the club all ran away. After parking the car in front of the club, Lin Feng and the others got out of the car and looked up at the door and the signboard. Let's spend the night here. The building here is sealed, so it's relatively safe. Compared to the relaxed Lin Feng and the others, Chen Yuding and the others got off the car with vigilant expressions. Then he found that there was still not a single zombie around. Chen Yuding, Lu Chongfeng, and the others all had strange expressions on their faces. Why weren't there any zombies nearby? Logically, there should be a lot of zombies here. But along the way, when the zombies saw them, they would turn around and run. The two of them suspected that Lin Feng and the others must have something. Even the zombies were afraid of him. He entered the clubhouse because it was already night. There was no electricity in the city, so they were all looking around with flashlights. As a result, there was not a single zombie in the clubhouse, even though it was dark. Lin Feng and the others found the location of the restaurant and cooked some simple food. 20 to 30 people were gathered in the dining room, waiting for dinner to be ready. While no one was paying attention, Lin Xiao left. She flashed into the space and said to Qiu Lily, "Lily, go out and keep an eye on those people. I'm going to the bottom of the lake tonight." Qiu Lily sat up from the sofa and nodded. Okay. After sending Qiu Lily out, Lin Xiao continued to release the other zombie leaders, and number 1 and number 2. Then she walked to the lake and dragged a chair to put it on the ground by the lake. She took off her hat and sunglasses and took off her clothes. Then she walked into the lake naked. Tong Tong had already fallen asleep in Lu Jun's arms. Lu Jun sat on the sofa and watched Lin Xiao's back as she went into the water. Her back was beautiful, and her waist was very thin. Well, her butt was perky, her legs were long, and her skin was white. If she had long hair behind her, it would be a beautiful scene. Unfortunately, her head was bare. Lu Jun thought in her heart. Lin Xiao touched his stomach and felt that it was still a strange feeling. It was like cotton. After stepping into the water, the branches of the small vine wrapped around her. Then it pulled her down to the bottom of the lake. Countless branches and tentacles wrapped around Lin Xiao's body, gradually wrapping her into a jade-white human cocoon. Lin Xiao could feel a familiar energy seeping into her body, and then her body, which could only feel hot but not cold, began to slowly heat up. Lin Xiao didn't know if she could grow her hair back this time, but she knew. At least her belly should recover a bit. Her belly was getting hotter and hotter, like a ball of fire burning. Her throat was also burning, and so was her head. The jade-white human cocoon reflected a layer of faint green light from the inside. After a long time, the light gradually faded, and then a black fog suddenly came out of the human cocoon. The black fog didn't melt in the water, but actively swam. The moment the black mist appeared, the jade-white vines suddenly let go of Lin Xiao at lightning speed. The black fog quickly wrapped Lin Xiao's whole body. Without the support of the small vine, Lin Xiao's body didn't sink to the bottom of the lake and just floated in the middle of the lake. When Lin Xiao woke up, she found that it was pitch black in front of her. She thought she was still not awake. But after 2 seconds, she suddenly found that the darkness in front of her was just her own fog. With a thought, the black fog immediately gathered in her palm. The darkness in front of her also dispersed. Lin Xiao then realized that she was still at the bottom of the lake. Seeing that the black fog around Lin Xiao had drilled into her palm, Little Vine, who had been guarding below, immediately stretched out her branches. "Mama, mama, mama, you're awake." The small vine wrapped around Lin Xiao's waist and lifted her up. Lin Xiao replied in her heart, How long has it been?" The small vine said, "Not long, a few hours." In fact, sometimes Lin Xiao was very curious. What was the background of this small vine? She seemed to have a very young mind, but she knew a lot of things. In addition to acting coquettishly, she also knew a lot of common sense. Lin Xiao came out of the water and then swam towards the shore. The first thing she did after reaching the shore was to put on her clothes. Your hair seems to have grown longer, but it's so short." A voice suddenly sounded beside her, and Lu Jun appeared like a ghost. Lin Xiao stopped putting on her clothes and turned to look at her. Then she raised a hand and touched the top of her head. Then she understood what Lu Jun said. It seemed to have grown long. It did grow. But she touched a layer of short thorns. It was probably like the kind of hair that had just been shaved, and the remaining dregs were a little longer than hers. Then Lu Jun stabbed her again. Why can Lily's hair grow so long? Yours just popped out a little, right? Ha ha ha. I feel that Lily and the small vine have some unspeakable relationship. Chapter 296. Lin Xiao silently looked at Lu Jun with an expression of, "I'll hit you if you keep talking." Lu Jun turned to look at the lake with a smile, and then asked, "Aren't you going to ask Little Man about your current situation?" Lin Xiao then remembered that she had to ask. "Little Man?" She put on her clothes, turned her head, and shouted towards the lake. Suddenly, she touched her belly. It became hard. Little Man emerged from the lake, stretching out her vine tentacles to the lake. Then she wrapped them around Lin Xiao's hand. "Mama," Lin Xiao asked her, "Little Man, why is it so hard for my hair to grow? Lily's hair can grow so long, but I can only grow a little thorny." Little Man said, "Mommy, I've concentrated all my energy on your belly. The recovery of your hair and throat will be a little slower, but Mommy's hair is alive now. It was dead before. Mommy doesn't need to look for Little Man to heal her hair now, because it can slowly grow out on its own, but it may be a little slower." Lin Xiao looked at her in surprise. Can it grow out on its own now? Isn't it like a normal person?" Lu Jun also looked at Lin Xiao in surprise. From what she said, did it mean that her hair could grow out like a normal person? Not like zombies like them, whose hair was dead. Little Man said, Yeah, that's it, Mama. Little Man is a little tired." Seeing that Little Man's tentacles were not twisting as vigorously as usual, Lin Xiao said, "Well, if you're tired, go and have a rest." "Thank you." Little Man said unhappily, "Mama, you're thanking Little Man again." Mama makes Little Man feel like an outsider, seeming to feel that Little Man was a little wronged. Lin Xiao quickly touched the vines on her wrist. She said, "Sorry, I was wrong. My dear Little Man is so cute. How can you be an outsider? We are a family." Hearing this, Little Man became happy. "Yet Little Man is the cutest. Then Little Man will go to sleep, Mama. Call Little Man if you need anything." After saying that, she let go of Lin Xiao's hand and the vines retreated into the water. Lu Jun looked at Lin Xiao and asked curiously, "Little Man, are you unhappy? What is her relationship with you? You've only said thank you, and she's already upset." Lin Xiao shook his head and said, "I don't know what her relationship with me is, but the moment she appeared, I saw her. Just call me, Mom. Lu Jun's eyes widened as he looked at her in disbelief. She called you mommy? It can't really be your child, right? Lin Xiao looked at her with a strange expression and asked, Are you talking about me? Or Lu Tianyu's? Could it be that I've been pregnant before, but I don't know about it now? Lu Jun lowered his eyes and thought for a moment before saying, Before the base was destroyed, there was no news of the leader being pregnant. But even if you're really pregnant, you won't announce it so soon, right? Besides, no one saw your belly getting bigger at that time. As she spoke, she looked at Lin Xiao's abdomen. Lin Xiao shook her head. But my current body is no longer my original one. Even if I was pregnant before, the child might have disappeared. It can't be that the child's soul was reborn with me, right? Speaking of this, she suddenly froze. Then she looked at Lu Jun silently. It seems possible. Lu Jun also looked at her. Both of them were silent for 7 or 8 seconds. Lin Xiao covered her forehead and said in disbelief, Wait a minute, let me calm down. That's impossible. Lu Jun widened her eyes and said, Why is it impossible? Aren't you here? Why can't the child come over? Lin Xiao suddenly thought of another question. She put down her hand and asked, Wait a minute, you said I'm pregnant. Who is that man? Lu Jun looked at her and was silent for 3 seconds before she suddenly said, I can only say that before the base was betrayed by him, he has always been by your side. Lin Xiao looked at her and said seriously, You mean Yang Jianhua? Both of them were silent again. But Lin Xiao's face suddenly darkened, and then she said in a cold voice, You mean, I had a relationship with Yang Jianhua before, and then I was pregnant with his child. But would that scumbag betray the base along with me, and the child even before the child was discovered? Is this the case? Suddenly feeling the pressure around Lin Xiao getting lower and lower, Lu Jun frowned and said, Don't get excited. This is just our guess, before you recover your memory. These are just fictitious assumptions. Maybe the child wasn't brought over by you. Maybe the child's father is not Yang Jianhua, but someone else. Lin Xiao took a deep breath and calmed herself down. Thinking about Lu Jun's words, they were indeed reasonable. She suddenly thought of the environment she saw when she went down to the bottom of the lake, that kind of purple and dark red. Now thinking about it, she felt that it shouldn't be her uterus. No way, little man couldn't really be her child. Let me calm down first, Lin Xiao said with a dull expression, and then flashed out of the space. After coming out, Lin Xiao stood on the roof of the club and lowered her head to touch her stomach. She didn't know why. After listening to Lu Jun's words, Lin Xiao was very concerned about this matter and even had a strange kind of expectation. Moreover, did Yang Jianhua have this kind of relationship with her? If that was the case, then wasn't she blind to fall for that man before? Really blind. Thinking about the Yang Jianhua she saw now, and thinking that she had slept with this man before, she only felt a burst of nausea in her heart. Lin Xiao put her hand on her lower abdomen, thinking that if it was the child's soul that was reborn with her, what kind of appearance did the child have in her space? Little Man said that when she reached level 5, she could come out. Then how did she come out? What method did she use? Could it be that she gave birth to it? But her current body and her stomach was empty. Although the uterus might still be there, after turning into a zombie, it had already died. Could it give birth to another life? She didn't know why, but Lin Xiao suddenly remembered that this body had done it with Wu Chengyue before it died. Her mind suddenly flashed with a possibility. No way, right. If it was Wu Chengyue's essence, Lu Tianyu's egg, and the baby's soul that she brought with her, Lin Xiao felt that if the child was really born, then she must go to do a DNA test. Just as Lin Xiao was still struggling with the matter of the child on the roof, her expression suddenly changed slightly. Then, she walked to the edge of the roof and looked down. In the middle of the night, she saw a few sneaky figures below. They walked back and forth beside the chariot that Lin Xiao had given to the Wind Court team. Lin Xiao frowned slightly. She put on her hat and then hid her figure. She turned transparent and jumped down from the roof. Chapter 297. Next to the car were Lu Changfeng and Lu Ting, as well as 2 other members of their team. Lu Changfeng had a disapproving expression on his face and said in a low voice, Lu Ting, It's immoral of you to do this. They helped us, but we're going to steal from them. Lu Ting said disdainfully, Brother, do you think they're really helping us? I don't think so. They said they're recruiting us to be construction workers and giving us rice and flour. That sounds nice, but there's no such thing nowadays. They must have some unspeakable secret. Maybe they want us to die? Besides, I'm just taking the car away. I didn't do anything to hurt them, did I? If I wanted to kill them, they wouldn't be able to resist now. Lu Changfeng was silent for a while and then continued, But if we leave, what about Chen Yuding and the others? They'll be harmed. Lu Ting seemed to be a little angry and said, What does it have to do with us? Both of you are captains, but why does everyone only listen to him? Why doesn't he take you seriously? And those two disabled people, I already said to throw them away so that they won't bring us trouble on the way back. He didn't want to bring us any trouble along the way, but he insisted on bringing it back. What's the use of taking them back? Can they still come back to life? The two useless people she was talking about were the two young boys who had been taken away by the robbers with her. Lu Changfeng said with a gloomy face, Lu Ting, as long as they're not dead, there's hope. Besides, aren't we already halfway back safely? Just bear with it, and we'll be back to the base tomorrow. Why do you have to do this? Lu Ting turned to look at the car next to her and reached out to touch it. She said with a greedy face, Brother, you're thinking too much. That's why Chen Yuding always suppressed you. Brother, look at this car. Isn't it cool? And isn't the performance of the car awesome? And the weapons on the top are not something ordinary people like us can get. Brother, don't you want such an awesome car? With this car, won't we be much safer when we go out on missions in the future? She slowly tempted Lu Changfeng. Sure enough, after hearing her words, Lu Changfeng's eyes wavered as he looked at the car. There was no man who didn't like cars. Moreover, this was a military-grade tank. Its combat value and defense value were many times higher than the ordinary vehicles that he had modified himself. Lu Ting urged impatiently, Brother, make up your mind quickly. The hypnosis effect of Alu's arcana is about to disappear. When they wake up, we won't have a chance. Although Lu Changfeng was somewhat moved, he was still somewhat hesitant in his heart. At this moment, Lin Xiao quietly moved to Lu Ting's side and reached out his hand. He suddenly grabbed her slender neck and pressed her against the car. Bam! Lu Ting was caught off guard and was pinned against the car. She screamed in fear. Then, he looked at the empty space in front of him with a dumbfounded expression. He couldn't see anything, but the feeling of his neck being squeezed tightly by a hand was so real. Cough. Cough. Blarg. The feeling of suffocation immediately made her brain heat up, and a dull pain rose in her chest. She grabbed her neck in a panic, and sure enough, she grabbed an arm. Then, she followed the arm forward, but only touched a shoulder. Lu Changfeng and the other two people were also shocked by Lu Ting's sudden appearance. They looked at Lu Ting's painful expression as if she was being strangled by something, but they couldn't see what was doing it to her. They were all stunned and forgot to react for a moment, until they saw a figure appear in front of Lu Ting. Woman, I can see that you are very ambitious this morning, but your courage is bigger than your ambition. A hoarse voice sounded. Lu Ting looked at Lin Xiao, who appeared in front of her in horror. She opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but she couldn't say anything. Her face was also a little green. Gotcha! There was a sound of metal. When Lu Changfeng and the two people next to him recovered, they immediately raised their guns at Lin Xiao. Stop! Let her go! Lin Xiao turned her head and looked at them. Her eyes couldn't be seen through the sunglasses in the dark, but the corner of her mouth was tightly curled. Originally, I wanted to let her live, but since you guys pointed your guns at me, it seems that you don't want her life anymore. Looks like you don't want her life anymore. Her voice was hoarse and low to begin with, and it sounded even more sinister in the dark night. At the same time, Lin Xiao slightly tightened her grip on Lu Ting's neck. Lu Ting was like a fish on the shore. She opened her mouth wide and breathed hard, but she couldn't take in any air. The feeling of suffocation made her chest feel like it was about to explode. Her eyes were wide open, as if they were about to pop out. Lu Changfeng was stunned again. His hand that was holding the gun was shaking. At this time, Lin Xiao suddenly moved. She took a step back and let go of Lu Ting. Lu Ting slid to the ground like a piece of rag. She covered her neck with both hands and breathed hard. Cough, cough, cough. She sat on the ground and painfully coughed. Lin Xiao looked at her and said, I don't like to kill people for no reason, and I won't kill people randomly. Seeing that you guys only wanted to steal, I will let you live. Get out. As she spoke, she turned around and walked into the club. Lu Changfeng quickly put away his gun and ran to Lu Ting's side. Lu Ting, how are you? Are you okay? After Lu Ting breathed in, the pain in her chest still hadn't disappeared, but at least she felt a little better. She raised her head and stared at Lin Xiao's back with an ugly expression. Her eyes were full of hatred and murderous intent. When Lu Changfeng got close, she suddenly grabbed Lu Changfeng's gun and shot at Lin Xiao. To dash Lu Ting. Stop. Lu Changfeng was startled by her, and when he came back to his senses, by the time he reacted, Lu Ting had already fired. However, Lin Xiao suddenly backhanded and grabbed the gun when she fired. Then, she turned around and opened her palm. A few bullets were lying quietly in her palm. Ding, ding, ding. Lin Xiao threw the bullets to the ground. Lu Ting and the others widened their eyes. Although she couldn't see the bullets in Lin Xiao's palm, she could still hear the sound of the bullets falling to the ground. You're courting death. Since you're courting death, I will fulfill your wish, Lin Xiao said calmly. Then, she suddenly flicked her finger at Lu Ting. Puff! There was a light sound of wind. Then, Lu Ting fell to the ground with a frozen expression. Lu Changfeng looked down and saw that Lu Ting wasn't moving. He hurriedly squatted down and ran to her. Lu Ting? Lu Ting? Lu Ting? When he picked her up, he found that blood was slowly seeping out of Lu Ting's forehead. Then, half of her head slowly slid down, revealing her red and white brain. Lin Xiao was less than 2 meters away from Lu Ting, so she only flicked her claw and directly cut Lu Ting's skull. I said that I don't like to kill people, but it doesn't mean that I can let others kill me, Lin Xiao said calmly to Lu Changfeng. Chapter 298. The current Lin Xiao was not that afraid of rank 6 metahumans anymore, so she was not worried that Lu Changfeng, a rank 6 water metahuman, would attack her. Because when she was in the space, Little Man had indeed helped her increase her strength again. From the pair of green eyes behind her sunglasses, it could be seen that she was now a rank 5 zombie leader. However, she didn't know how strong her overall strength was. At least she would not be weaker than an ordinary rank 6 zombie king. Then when facing a rank 6 metahuman, she would be able to face them calmly. Unlike in the morning, when she needed to drag the rank 6 metahumans into the space to weaken them before she could make a move. Lin Xiao turned around again and walked into the floor. At this moment, a white shadow suddenly flashed down. It flashed past Lu Changfeng and the others, and then the 3 men suddenly fell to the ground. Puff, puff. Hearing the sound behind her, Lin Xiao turned around. She saw Qiu Lily standing at the side, looking at her. Do you want to let these 3 people go? Letting them go will only bring us trouble in the future. Lin Xiao looked at her, shook her head, and said with a smile, I was waiting for you to make a move. Even if I really fought with him, I might be able to beat him, but it would be a bit more troublesome. So it was easy to let you do it. Qiu Lily looked at her, and then thought of something. So you were waiting for me to be your fighter. Lin Xiao looked at the men who were knocked out by Qiu Lily and said, Yeah. Suddenly, she walked over, and then squatted beside Lu Ting. She used her finger to dig into her smooth head, and then dug out a crystal core. The rank 4 crystal core emitted a faint blue light in the night. She did not understand why Chen Yuding and Lu Changfeng kept chasing the robbers, knowing that they might not be a match for the robbers. Were they also like moths to a flame? Just now, she heard Lu Ting call Lu Changfeng brother, so the 2 of them were brother and sister. But when she was next to the other members of the Wind Court, she always felt that they had a different view of her. They seemed to feel that she was very important, but the important thing was not this person, but something about her. But Lin Xiao had observed Lu Ting, and there was nothing worth paying attention to. That meant she could only rely on her ability. Moreover, Lu Ting did not use her special ability. In other words, the people in the team actually cared about her ability? What kind of ability did people care about the most? If it wasn't the water element, then it was the space element. Lin Xiao took out her core crystal, thinking that it was possible that this woman was also a water type, because Qin Yuding and the others said that they only wanted to exchange food and weapons with her, and they even wanted to exchange for water. Also, Lu Changfeng was also a water elemental. Could it be that these two siblings had the same special ability? When the crystal core turned into energy from her hand and entered her body, she knew she was wrong. Because this wasn't a water element, it was a space element. Sensing the changes in his space, Lin Xiao was speechless. Why were spatial ability users as cheap as cabbages now? She had met two in just one day. She looked at Lu Changfeng and the other two who had fainted and raised her head to ask Qiu Lily, "Why didn't you just kill them? What the hell do you mean by knocking him out?" Qiu Lily turned around and said, "Humph, I won't kill people for no reason." Hearing her say that, Lin Xiao had no choice but to wave her claws at the three. Puff puff, there was a slight sound of air being cut, and the sound of flesh and bones being cut open. If it was before the apocalypse, of course, she wouldn't casually kill people, because killing people was against the law. But now, killing people was not against the law. Whoever was the strongest would be the boss, and that was the law. The apocalypse was so chaotic, in order to survive. The law already existed in name only. Of course, there were still rules in the base. Otherwise, if there were too many people, they wouldn't be able to manage it. So a country had its laws, and a family had its rules. There were also mandatory rules in the base. Outside the base, there were no more rules. So if you died outside, no one would care. If you wanted to take revenge, you could, but you couldn't kill people inside the base. Outside the base, you could kill them however you wanted. If they died, you could save some food. If these people didn't want to kill Lin Xiao, then she wouldn't have killed them. However, they wanted to kill her. So Lin Xiao wouldn't leave them alive to become a disaster in the future. Ungrateful people wouldn't thank others for saving them. They would only remember what others did to them, and then think of ways to take revenge. Qiu Lily took out the crystals of Lu Changfeng and the other two people, and then wiped them on the bodies. Then she put them into her small bag. Lin Xiao turned around and went into the club. When she arrived at the bar and restaurant, she saw a group of people lying on the ground, motionless on the table. At this time, Lin Feng was sitting on the bar counter, like a drunkard who just woke up. He supported his forehead with his hand, but his eyes couldn't open. Lin Xiao glanced at him, and then looked at the figures of Mrs. Lin and the others. She found that they were all lying on the sofa, looking like they had fallen asleep. Lin Xiaolu was lying on Cheng Wangshue's lap. Looking back at Lin Feng, Lin Xiao picked up a cup on the table, and then the cup disappeared for 2 seconds, and then appeared in her hand, filled with water. Lin Xiao squatted in front of Lin Xiaolu, helped her up, and slowly fed her a cup of water. Then she continued to feed Mrs. Lin, Lin Wanwen, and Cheng Wangxue. After that, she walked to the bar counter on Lin Feng's side. Then she also gave him a cup of water. She could feel that there was a strange energy in these people, which didn't belong to them. It should be what Lu Ting said before, that Lu used some special ability on these people that made them fall into a coma. Lin Xiao didn't know how they used it, but so many people fell asleep. After Lin Xiao let them drink her water, the strange energy slowly disappeared. What? What happened? Mrs. Lin, Lin Luoran, and Lin Luoran see that everyone is lying on the ground, leaning on the table, and sleeping on the chair. They were all confused and surprised. Lin Xiao said, "When I wasn't here, you were all plotted against. If I came out a bit later, we would have lost a car tonight." Although she definitely had the ability to get it back in the end. What happened? Lin Feng also looked at her in confusion. Lin Xiao said, "Lu Ting wanted to steal the car I gave you today when you were all asleep, but I've already killed him." What? You killed them? Lin Feng and the others looked at her in surprise. There was no blame in their tone, but they were surprised that Lin Xiao would kill them. Lin Xiao spread out her hands and said, "I didn't do it first. I never show mercy to those who shoot at me." Lin Feng nodded. Okay. Chapter 299. After using Lin Xiao's lake water to wake the others up, Qin Yuding knew what Lu Ting and Lu Changfeng had done and was very angry. That woman has always been selfish, but I didn't think she would covet your car. Lin Xiao sat on the side and didn't say anything. She just held a glass of water and drank. She even left us behind. She wanted you to know what happened to the car after they stole it. Then she would vent her anger on us? One of Chen Yuding's companions said angrily. Lin Feng nodded and said, if they really succeeded in stealing the car, we definitely wouldn't let you go. Chen Yuding and the others didn't say anything. Lin Xiao stood up and walked past them. Then she said, actually, I knew this morning that she didn't really believe what I said. Later, when she saw the car, she still didn't believe me. So I already noticed her along the way. Then she walked back to the bar and looked at the time. It was 2 in the morning. Forget it. Anyway, they have been taken care of by me. At least he could sleep peacefully. You guys quickly find a place to rest and continue the journey tomorrow morning. She didn't need to worry about Chen Yuding and the Lu siblings having evil thoughts because she had just walked around. Apart from being shocked by what Lu Ting and Lu Chongfeng had done, these people didn't have any other thoughts. Of course, Lin Feng and the others knew that Lin Xiao wouldn't let these people do anything bad, so they were relieved. However, he was still a little afraid of losing consciousness due to some kind of strange ability. At dawn, Lin Feng and the others got up and made some simple breakfast. It was still a pot of meat porridge. There was no air in Lin Wenwen's space. It was a vacuum zone. It was very useful for keeping food fresh, but she couldn't bring people in. When Lin Xiao entered the space and saw the things in the third subspace, she knew why Chen Yuding and the others cared so much about her. Although Chen Yuding and the others didn't show it on their faces, their eyes often stared at Lu Ting intentionally or unintentionally. And when they heard Lin Xiao say that she killed Lu Ting, their hearts also fluctuated a lot. But they didn't say anything. Lu Ting's space was actually filled with a few barrels of gasoline. There was a huge shortage of gasoline in the apocalypse. No wonder they cared so much about her. Lin Xiao himself had only used 1 barrel of oil, and there were still 2 or 3 barrels that had not been opened. Now that he had a few more barrels, he had unexpectedly made a fortune. She found that other than the first subspace, which could hold people before entering her, the other 2 subspaces could not. But after she took it in, it was connected. Therefore, they were all filled with air. Lin Xiao took a look inside Lu Ting's space. Other than a few barrels of oil, there were also a few female products. There was nothing else. Moreover, this space was very small, even smaller than Space 1. It was only slightly bigger than a washroom. Therefore, after filling a few barrels of oil, the tank was already full. Lin Xiao walked out and was about to leave. Suddenly, a ball of furry stuff leaned over. She looked down and saw that it was a gray rabbit. The gray rabbit has grown a lot in her space, and it has become fatter, eating the grass in her space, eating her strawberries, and eating her vegetables. It would be a wonder if he wasn't fat. However, this fellow rarely took the initiative to approach her. Every time Xiao Budian carried it out, it would run back. Lin Xiao bent down to pick it up and asked, "What's wrong? You came to find me. Don't tell me you miss Xiao Budian." Speaking of Xiao Budian, she did not know if anyone had noticed the current situation on her side. That Yang Chao was really not a good person. She had no opinion on dealing with Wu Chengyue, but starting with Xiao Budian, Lin Xiao felt that this man was not a good person. Moreover, from the way he indulged Lu Tianyu to provoke Wu Chengyue, it could be seen that this man liked to use some despicable means. On the other side, in the civilian area outside Sea City Base, in a room, the bandit boss, who had escaped from Lin Xiao's side, said coldly to another man in the room with a gloomy face, "What your leader said is false. What asking us to deal with the relatives of the leader of Hades' king base? What dealing with Yuan Tianqing? He is simply lying to us. I made me lose 11 brothers. Go back and tell your leader to prepare to pay with his life." Although the other man was only a rank 6 ability user, he was not afraid of the rank 7 bandit boss at all. He said with a faint smile, "Tang He, don't get too excited. We didn't expect that we would make you lose all your brothers. After all, our leader believed in your strength. That's why he cooperated with you, right? Besides, there's nothing for us to gain by tricking you, right?" The boss of the robbers, who was also the Tang He that the robbers were talking about, suppressed the air pressure around him. There was a trace of hostility in his voice. "If you're not lying to us, why didn't you tell me that there was a rank 6 zombie king there? And it's a space type. If I had known in advance, I wouldn't have let it kill my brothers. The other party shook his head and said, we really didn't know about this. Moreover, the Zombie King has always been elusive, and it's very difficult to encounter one. Besides, you're a rank 7 ability user. Even if you encounter a rank 6 Zombie King, you can still kill it, can't you? Tang He looked at the other party and was silent for a few seconds before saying, the other party is a space ability user and can enter space at any time. Let your leader try, and see if he can kill a Zombie King that can disappear in front of you at any time. Moreover, there's more than just a Zombie King there. The powerful pressure he felt at that time. If he guessed correctly, it should be a rank 2 king. If that's the case, he should let someone go and scout it out first. The energy of a rank 2 king zombie core is enormous. It's enough to let a rank 7 ability user break through to rank 8 without any suspense. But at the same time, the danger of a rank 2 king is also extremely high. When a rank 1 king is angry, the zombie tide that he can cause can exceed 5,000 to 6,000 zombies. But no one knows about a zombie tide caused by a rank 2 king. But if you think about it, you should be able to guess that there's at least 10,000 to 20,000 zombies. If the leaders of the major bases know that there's a rank 2 king in that area, it will definitely cause a huge commotion. The other party obviously didn't hear the main point of Tang He's words and only heard about the space-type zombies. However, it's rare to encounter space-type zombies. If you bring this zombie core back, you might be able to exchange it for something better. The other party looked at Tang He and said with his eyes slightly lit up. Tang He coldly snorted and said, "Humph. If you have the ability to kill it in one fell swoop, otherwise it won't be able to come out after entering space. What can you do?" Chapter 300. When Tang He met up with Yang Chao's people, Yuan Tianxing's people also came early in the morning. Du Yuanxing, who went to open the door after hearing the knock, looked at the beauty standing at the door with a blank expression. Deputy Leader Yin. So early in the morning, good morning. Du Yuanxing, who suddenly didn't know what to say, felt a little overwhelmed. Yin Fangyu smiled elegantly at him and said, "What's wrong? Aren't you going to invite me in? Your deputy leader is up, right? I'm really sorry to disturb your sweet dreams so early in the morning." No, it's not a disturbance. Not a disturbance. I do have to trouble you to wait for a while. I don't want to see something unsightly when I come in. Du Yuanxing immediately shook his head in a panic, then seemed to remember something and blocked the door to stop her from entering. After speaking to her, Du Yuanxing turned around and shouted at the people who were still naked or only wearing a pair of underwear, "Hey, you guys move faster. Put on your clothes. It's so rude to let a beauty wait." The others had just woken up and were holding toothbrushes and hanging towels as they walked by. When they heard the door open, they were all stunned for a moment and looked at the side of the door with sleepy faces. But when they heard Du Yuanxing call Deputy Leader Yin, they immediately woke up. So when Du Yuanxing turned around and shouted for them, these people were still swaying to find their clothes to wear. Yuan Tianxing, who was wearing a white t-shirt, subconsciously looked down at himself after hearing his shout. He didn't find anything wrong, so he went to brush his teeth. After a few minutes, Du Yuanxing opened the door and let Yin Fangyu in. "Sorry to make you wait for so long. Please come in." The faint smile on Yin Fangyu's face didn't change. She walked in with her exquisite high heels swaying her waist. "Please sit." Yuan Tianxing sat on one of the 2 single sofas in the room. He gestured to the other sofa with his hand and poured her a glass of water. Of course, Yin Fangyu didn't come empty-handed. She carried a bag in her hand. After putting the bag down, she sat down. "This is the breakfast I brought for you. I made it myself. Come and try it." As she spoke, she opened the bag, and a mixture of egg and scallions wafted out. Yuan Tianxing smiled politely and said, "Next time you don't have to bring anything. That will make us feel bad." Looking at the bag that Yin Fangyu opened, there were pieces of rolled-up onion omelets that were still steaming hot. Everyone who had just woken up and had not eaten breakfast could not help but swallow their saliva. "Come and eat. I made a lot. I'm just afraid that you won't have enough to eat," Yin Fangyu said to them with a smile. Du Yuanxing, Lin Yu, Lu Junjie, and the others were drooling as they looked at the omelet, but they didn't dare to touch it. In the end, he tore off the omelet reluctantly and shifted his gaze to Yuan Tianqing beside him. Yuan Tianqing took 2 whiffs of the fragrance and didn't stand on ceremony. He said to the others, "Go get some bowls and chopsticks. You can eat it yourself." Once everyone received the order, they immediately rushed into the kitchen and took out their bowls and chopsticks. Then, they squeezed to the front of the table and took 2 pieces each. Yin Fengyu's omelet was very big, but it was not enough for a grown man to eat. Therefore, they all took 2 pieces and retreated to the side, away from Yin Fengyu and Yuan Tianqing, and found a quiet corner to eat. In fact, they directly left the room and squatted outside the door. This great beauty Yin seems to be really interested in our boss. She even brought breakfast so early in the morning? Du Yuanqing took a bite of the fragrant, soft, and refreshing omelet and said happily as he chewed, "Even a blind person can see that," Lin Yu said. "It's a pity that our boss doesn't like her," Lu Junjie said with a look of pity. "But why did she come so early in the morning? Who knows? She's a deputy leader after all. She's actually quite busy with work. If she didn't have anything to do, she wouldn't have the time to come personally." That's true. The few people squatted outside the room and ate as they chatted. Only Yuan Tianqing took 2 bites of the 2 people in the room. "Tell me, you didn't come early just to treat me to breakfast, right?" Yuan Tianqing smiled and looked at Yin Fengyu. The smile on Yin Fengyu's face faded at this moment. She looked at him seriously and said, "I received a piece of news about you, Leader Wu, and the surviving relatives of the former Netherworld King's base and the leader of Nether Flame." Hearing her words, Yuan Tianqing's face also became indifferent. "What news? And it's targeting so many of us?" Yin Fengyu said, "Yang Chao. He has always been at odds with Leader Wu, so anyone who has worked with Leader Wu will often be targeted by Yang Chao. So this time, he has his eyes on you. He seems to have found some information about your relationship with the surviving relatives of the leader of Nether Flame. He is now preparing to ambush you when you leave the base, and he has already sent people to deal with your companions outside the base." Yuan Tianqing's expression turned slightly cold, and he said, "Is what you said true?" Yin Fengyu nodded and said, "The news is true. Of course, it's up to you whether you believe it or not. You can also go and verify it with Leader Wu. I think he should have received the news too." Yuan Tianqing suddenly stood up, looked at her, and said, "Then you mean that there are already people outside preparing to deal with Lin Feng and the others?" Yin Fengyu looked up at him. "That's right." Yuan Tianqing clenched his right fist and punched his left palm. He said anxiously, "Bad news. Isn't Lin Feng and the others in danger now?" Yin Fengyu said, "That's why I came to tell you this early in the morning. It's up to you what to do." Yuan Tianqing looked at her gratefully and said, "Thank you. I got it. I'll return this favor in the future." Seeing that he was indeed a little anxious, Yin Fengyu also stood up. "Then I'll leave first. If you want to think of a way to save them, you need to hurry." Saying that, she walked to the door. Yuan Tianqing nodded at her and said, "I got it." Yin Fengyu raised a charming smile at him, then walked to the door and reached out to open it. The 5 people squatting on the ground on both sides of the door turned to look at her at the same time. Then, they immediately stood up in the next second. "Ahem, Deputy Leader Yin, are you leaving?" "Thank you. The breakfast was delicious." Yin Fengyu said with a smile, "My cooking isn't good. This is the only thing I can bring out. As long as you guys like it. I'll leave first. See you next time." Saying that, she walked out. As she walked, she looked back at them with a smile and waved. The beautiful woman looked back and smiled, so the people at the doors stared blankly at her back as she walked away. After a few seconds, when Yin Fengyu's beautiful back entered the elevator, they came back to their senses. Only then did they come back to their senses. When they turned around, they saw Yuan Tianqing staring at them calmly. Yuan Tianqing said, "Have you seen enough? Wipe your saliva." Everyone subconsciously wiped their mouths. Chapter 301. 10 minutes later, Yuan Tianqing took Du Yuanqing and Lin Yu to Wu Chengyue's residence. At Wu Chengyue's home, Meng Yu and Imo Li were in Lingling's room. Wu Chengyue, Xiao Yunlong and the Dr. Big Tree were sitting in the hall. The three of them looked worried. Suddenly Xiao Liqing ran in. Leader, Deputy Leader Yuan is here. Wu Chengyue looked up and immediately responded. Invite him in. Xiao Liqing ran out. A few seconds later, he saw Yuan Tianqing walk in alone. Wu Chengyue and the others stood up. Xiao Yunlong gave up his single sofa and gestured to Yuan Tianqing. Please sit down. Then he moved a chair to the side and sat down. Yuan Tianqing sat down and looked at the depressed expressions of the others and asked with concern, Is Lingling's condition still not better? The three shook their heads. Ever since she drank the water given by Yuan Tianqing, Lingling's condition had stopped there. It was neither up nor down, and she was still in a semi-conscious state. But after her body temperature dropped to 50 degrees, it stopped fluctuating. No matter how much she drank later, it didn't have any effect. So now Lingling's condition had stopped there. Liang Dashu thought of many ways, but it was useless. After Mingyu woke up in the hospital, she immediately came back. She recovered very quickly because she felt very guilty about Lingling being kidnapped by level 6 zombies. She had been taking care of Lingling since she came back. Yuan Tianqing was also very worried and said, If this goes on, I don't know what the result will be. His words made the expressions of the other three people sink. Wu Chengyue quickly adjusted his expression and then asked Yuan Tianqing, By the way, why did you suddenly come here? Yuan Tianqing asked, There's something I want to confirm with you. I don't know if you've heard, but your base's leader Yang seems to be secretly attacking my companions outside the base. Wu Chengyue's expression immediately became dignified when he heard this. He said, Oh, yes. I've only just heard about this. In fact, seeing you come now, I also guessed that you should be here for this matter. I heard that Yang Chao secretly hooked up with a group of robbers outside. They seem to have made some kind of deal. Now those robbers have been heading in the direction you came from for a few days. Xiao Yunlong said, I was about to send someone to inform you. I didn't expect you to get the news first. Yuan Tianqing asked anxiously, Then, is this news true? Wouldn't Lin Feng and the others be in danger? Moreover, the other leaders of your base actually colluded with the robbers outside. Do you have any opinion on this matter? Xiao Yunlong turned to look at Wu Chengyue. Wu Chengyue said, We are currently trying our best to collect evidence about him. Without conclusive evidence, we can't do anything to him even if we have an opinion. Yuan Tianqing looked at him speechlessly. He had no way to refute what the other party said. He nodded and said, Well, since you've confirmed that the information is true, I think I should go out of the base first. Sorry to disturb you. With that, he stood up and prepared to leave. Wu Chengyue and the rest also stood up. Wu Chengyue waved to him. Wait a moment, let Yunlong go with you. I heard that the robbers Yang Chao is looking for are not ordinary robbers. There are estimated to be more than 2 level 6 ability users. You definitely can't deal with them alone. As he spoke, he looked at Xiao Yunlong, who nodded. Yuan Tianqing looked at Wu Chengyue with some surprise. He didn't expect him to let Xiao Yunlong go back with him. Wu Chengyue saw his expression and said with a smile, Don't look at me like that. Because of your help, Lingling's situation is not so bad now. It's just that I can't leave Lingling's side now. Otherwise, I can go with you to find Lin Feng and the others. So I can only let Xiao Yunlong do it for me. Yuan Tianqing nodded gratefully. Thank you, Xiao Yunlong said at this time. What are you thanking me for? You don't have to be so polite. You also helped us. Helping each other is what we should do. We are not ungrateful people. Yuan Tianqing nodded and said to Wu Chengyue, Then we'll leave first. See you next time. Wu Chengyue sent him to the door. If there is any accident, remember to send someone back to inform me. Yuan Tianqing. Okay. Thank you. After watching Yuan Tianqing and Xiao Yunlong go out, Liang Dashu said, I don't know what Yang Chao is going to do to you this time. Aren't you going to fight back? Wu Chengyue's expression turned cold. When Lingling's matter is over, I will fight back. Does he really think I don't know anything? Humph. He knew a lot of Yang Chao's little tricks, but because it didn't have much effect on him, so he didn't pay attention to him and watched him as if he was a clown. The most important thing now was Lingling's matter. He would prepare to deal with Yang Chao's matter later. Liang Dashu said, His actions are becoming more and more obvious and rampant, and he must know about Lingling's situation now. He probably wants to take advantage of Ling Ling's situation to come and make trouble. You have to be careful. Wu Chengyue's expression was cold, the elegance just now completely gone. If he dares to lay a hand on Ling Ling, I will kill him. When he said the word kill, there was an oppressive, murderous aura that flashed across his body. Liang Dashu looked at him and didn't say anything more. However, whether it was Yuan Tianqing, Wu Chengyue, or Yang Chao's side, they didn't know that Lin Feng and the others and Lin Xiao were almost at their Sea City base. Therefore, 2 hours later, when Lin Feng and the others entered Sea City base, they received news that Yuan Tianqing and the others had run out of Sea City. Moreover, they were looking for them. After coming out of the registration office, Lin Feng and the others were a little dumbfounded. So, they missed us? Cheng Wangxue said with a speechless expression. Lin Feng nodded and held his forehead helplessly. They came all the way to find Yuan Tianqing, but in the end, Yuan Tianqing ran out. Moreover, both sides had missed each other. They didn't bump into each other and directly missed each other. Lin Xiao stood at the side and said, "There's no need to worry about this. I can bring some people out to find them. You guys find a place to stay in this base first, and at the same time, find out how much Yuan Tianqing is doing here. Don't ask how she entered the base and passed those detectors, because she directly entered while invisible. No one noticed her at all, and she didn't need to do any registration. Therefore, the people in the base didn't know Lin Xiao was there. And when Tang He, the robber, came in, at least Yang Chao's people disguised him and covered him up." Hearing her words, Lin Feng felt inexplicably relieved. He said, "That's the only way. You guys are more suitable than us to find people." Shen Yuding, who had brought them into the base to do the registration, said, "They shouldn't have gone far. It's more likely that we can find them now." Because it was Lin Feng and the others' first time entering the base, Chen Yuding and the others played the role of a host. They brought them to a place to register and find a place to apply for temporary accommodation. Chapter 302. Lin Xiao said to Chen Yuding, "Then please take them to a place to live. I'll find you when I come back." Chen Yuding nodded to her. Lin Xiao turned to Lin Feng and said, "You don't have to arrange a place for me to live. I don't need it. Pay attention to your own safety in the base, especially the girls. When I came in, I felt a lot of malicious eyes staring at us." She looked around. Because as a woman, in the base where 90% of the population was male and 10% female, young and beautiful women would always attract attention, especially strange faces. Lin Wanwan and Cheng Wangxue were both good-looking. Although Long Qingying's facial features were not as delicate as them, her skin and temperament were very good. Even Mrs. Lin was a little older, but she still had her charm. There was no guarantee that some wretched people wouldn't stare at the older Mrs. Lin. Lin Feng and the others immediately turned to look around and found that there were some people secretly staring at them. Long Qingying's originally cold temperament suddenly dropped a few degrees. She raised her hand to hold the katana on her back and glanced around with murderous eyes. Immediately, half of those people's gazes retracted. Lin Feng withdrew his gaze and nodded to Lin Xiao. "I know." After separating from them, Lin Xiao immediately walked to a public bathroom. Then, in a flash, he entered a state of invisibility and silently walked out again. However, when she was halfway to the gate of the base, Little Man's voice suddenly came from the space. "Mama, mama, mama, mama." Little Man's voice sounded very anxious. Lin Xiao's footsteps came to a halt, and then he flashed into the space. As soon as she came in, she saw Little Man waving countless vines in the lake, stirring up the whole lake. Lu Jun and Qiu Lily were just sitting on the sofa, curiously looking at Little Man who suddenly made a fuss in the lake. And in the 3 spaces on the side, there were zombies number 1 to number 7 hiding. And Meng Meng hid in the small space of number 3 alone. The 8 zombies only stuck their heads out of the door, looking at Little Man in the lake with some horror. Because Qiu Lily complained about the dust on the road, she immediately asked to stay in the space. As a result, Meng Meng immediately pestered Lin Xiao. This time, she did not want Lin Xiao to let Qiu Lily out. Instead, she wanted her to go in as well. Lin Xiao asked for Qiu Lily's opinion and saw that she had no objections. Even Meng Meng was taken in. As a result, when he came in, he was also frightened by the little vine in the lake. Although Little Man didn't appear, Little Man's aura still made her a little nervous. Now that Little Man had appeared, Dreamy immediately rushed into the last space and refused to come out. What's wrong? Lin Xiao appeared by the lake and asked Little Man, who had suddenly become excited for some unknown reason. Little Man immediately stretched out a vine in front of her, then wrapped it around her hand and said, Mama, 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 take me to see Tiny Tot. Little Man feels her. She is not in a good condition now, Mama. Bring her in quickly. Lin Xiao looked at her jade-white tentacles in surprise. How can you feel Tiny Tot outside? Little Man said, the energy in Tiny Tot's body is about to explode. Because it is close, Little Man can feel it, Mama. Bring Tiny Tot in quickly. Although her current situation is suppressed by Little Man's energy, it will be a great burden to her body if it lasts for a long time. As she spoke, Little Man eagerly shook the vines in the lake. Seeing Little Man's anxious look, Lin Xiao had to agree with her. Okay, I'll go and find her home first. Anyway, even if she went out to chase Lin Feng, she was not in a hurry. Moreover, Tiny Tot's situation seemed to be very critical. She also wanted to see what was going on first. Little Man immediately became happy. Mama, hurry up. After coming out of the space, Lin Xiao continued to be invisible. Then, she looked left and right, found the tallest building nearby, and quickly climbed up. When she reached the top of the building, she stretched out her nose and sniffed around. Soon, she smelled the scent of Tiny Tot and Wu Chengyue, then turned around and jumped in the direction of Wu Chengyue's home. The distance from the outer area to the inner area was less than 2 kilometers, and Lin Xiao quickly entered the inner area. Then as she walked, she found that the place where Wu Chengyue lived was not in a high-end villa or a high-end apartment. Instead, he lived in a small building in an ordinary civilian area. Lin Xiao landed on the roof of Wu Chengyue's home, and then she felt that there were several level 5 paranormals guarding around Wu Chengyue's small building. In addition to Wu Chengyue, Tiny Tot, Mingyu, and 2 strangers in the house. As she got closer, she also felt the chaotic energy in Tiny Tot's body. This familiar feeling was like the situation last time when the energy in Little Lu's body exploded. Was Tiny Tot going to awaken? No way. Tiny Tot was younger than Little Lu. How could she endure the awakening at this time? However, the energy in Tiny Tot's body felt a little familiar, as if it was the same as the energy in the lake in her space. But there seemed to be something else. Moreover, Tiny Tot's restless energy seemed to be suppressed by a familiar energy. Wasn't the energy that was suppressing Tiny Tot's energy from her lake? This was something she was familiar with. After noticing Tiny Tot's situation, Lin Xiao directly jumped from the roof to the balcony of the 3rd floor. Then she walked in from the door of the room on the balcony, passed through the study, and walked to the corridor of the 3rd floor. Lingling's room was on the 3rd floor, but there were 2 people in her room. Lin Xiao looked around and then walked to the door of Tiny Tot's room. The door was open, and she saw that in addition to Mingyu, there was another woman in the room. Lin Xiao gently walked in and then walked to the side of Tiny Tot's bed. Looking at Tiny Tot covered with a thin layer of quilt, and his hands and feet were exposed. Her eyes were half closed, but her eyes were unfocused. On the bedside was a familiar-looking grass dragonfly. She made it up. She didn't expect this child to keep the grass dragonfly with him. Lin Xiao thought about it. She couldn't explain anything to Wu Chengyue now. But she couldn't just directly steal Tiny Tot, quietly take him away. Her eyes turned and suddenly flashed into space. Then she found a piece of paper and wrote a sentence on it. Cho Lily and the other zombies saw her suddenly appear again, and then find a piece of paper on the desk to write something, and then disappeared again. After Lin Xiao came out, she stood by the bed. She reached out and gently grabbed Tiny Tot's little hand, and then with a flash, disappeared. Then a piece of paper floated to the empty bed. The moment Tiny Tot disappeared, Mingyu and Emoli suddenly turned their heads and looked at the bed at the same time. As a result, they saw that Tiny Tot, who was originally lying on the bed, had disappeared. Chapter 303. Lingling. Where's Lingling? Mingyu jumped up and rushed to the bed. Looking at the empty bed, Emo Li's expressionless face was also dumbfounded. Mengyu looked at the piece of paper on the bed and picked it up. It wrote, "I'll take care of Lingling's situation. I don't have time to explain it to you now. Please wait for me to come back. Lin." A few seconds later, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard coming from outside the room. Then, Wu Chengyue appeared at the door. What happened to Lingling? Why did her aura suddenly disappear? Then, he looked at the empty bed and his eyes widened. His handsome face immediately turned ferocious. "Where's Lingling?" Mengyu turned around and raised the piece of paper in her hand. "I don't know what happened either." Lingling suddenly disappeared, but a piece of paper appeared. Wu Chengyue hurried in and took the piece of paper from her hand. After seeing the words, he forced himself to calm down and analyze the words on the piece of paper. What does it mean? Who wants to take Lingling away? Lin? Who is Lin? Liang Dashu walked over and looked at the words on the piece of paper. He comforted him. Calm down first. Maybe the other party doesn't have any bad intentions. Wu Chengyue held the piece of paper tightly and closed his eyes. Then, he stared at the words on the piece of paper and said, "It must be Yang Chao. Not many people know about Lingling's situation. He said he would take care of Lingling's situation. Does he think I'm stupid? Would I believe him?" The air pressure around him became unstable and waves of murderous intent leaked out. Liang Dashu said calmly, "Calm down first. First, who is this Lin? Find out first and then make a judgment. Of course, you can start with Yang Chao. Second, the other party doesn't seem to have any bad intentions and didn't threaten you. He also said to wait for him to come back. This means that he will come back to find you. Third." At this point, he paused and turned to Emoli and Mengyu. "Did you two feel anything when Lingling disappeared? Calm down and think about it." Hearing Liang Dashu's words, Mengyu and Emoli looked at each other. Mengyu forced herself to calm down and think about the situation just now, because for a moment, she felt an aura appear and then quickly disappear. When she looked up, Lingling was nowhere to be seen. The other party only appeared for a moment before disappearing. I think it should be a spatial ability. If the other party's ability is to turn invisible, it's impossible for him to pick up Lingling in an instant without us noticing anything. Emoli said, "I didn't sense any malicious thoughts or emotions, but I felt a trace of anxiety and confusion. I had a feeling that the person who came here knew about Lingling's current situation. Before he came, he probably didn't know much about it. As for why you're so anxious, I think you should think about it, leader. Who else would treat Lingling well? Maybe we should look on the bright side." Seeing Emoli finish her words coldly, Wu Chengyue calmed down a little. He looked at the words in his hand and suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Lin? Moreover, there was a space arcanist. Hey, didn't he meet such a person before returning to the base? Wu Chengyue immediately remembered the person who snatched his zombie king's corpse core in the Shihu district of Hangzhou. In the end, he fought with the other party, but he lost. Although he bit the other party at that time, that woman? She can turn invisible and also has a spatial ability. Could it be her? Wu Chengyue suddenly said, "I'm going to find someone." After saying that, he quickly walked out of the door. He was going to find that Lu Tianyi and ask him if he knew anything. The others saw him suddenly turn around and immediately followed him out. On the other side, Lin Xiao grabbed Tiny Tot as she flashed into the spatial ability and quickly hugged her. She looked down at Tiny Tot's half-closed eyes and softly called out, "Tiny Tot?" But Tiny Tot didn't have any reaction. Lin Xiao thought for a moment and suddenly squatted down on one knee. She put Tiny Tot's body on her lap and held him with one hand. Then she used her other hand to take off the hat and sunglasses on her head. She looked at Tiny Tot with a pair of dark green eyes and shouted again, "Tiny Tot, do you recognize me?" Miraculously, Tiny Tot's eyes changed a little this time, but it only flashed slightly and then returned to the original situation. Lin Xiao could only carry her and walk to the lake. She said to Little Man, "Little Man, Tiny Tot is about to awaken his ability. What do you think?" Little Man waved a few thick vines and came over. 3 of them separated and gently wrapped around Tiny Tot's body. Another one touched Lin Xiao. "Mama, don't worry, Little Man will successfully awaken Tiny Tot." Lin Xiao nodded and then let Little Man take Tiny Tot into the lake. Lu Jun and Qiu Lily both came to Lin Xiao's side. Neither of them knew Tiny Tot. They curiously asked, "Is this the Tiny Tot you just told little man about? Whose child is it? What's wrong?" Lin Xiao said, "It's the little princess of Haiqing Base. I don't know why she suddenly awakened her ability." Lu Jun asked, "Little princess? Is it the leader's daughter? Do you and little man know her?" She knew that Lin Xiao wouldn't bring the little princess of the base in for no reason and let little man help her. And it was even more impossible for little man to have any reaction to people from the outside world. Lin Xiao nodded. "Yes, before I met you. Speaking of which, it was this body's fault." Lu Jun and Qiu Lily looked at her curiously, but Lin Xiao didn't say much to them. She just said, "Oh, I'll tell you when I have time. I have to go out of the base to get Yuan Tianqing back first." Lu Jun and Qiu Lily looked at her even more strangely. "Huh, that Yuan Tianqing isn't in Haiqing Base? Where did he go?" Lin Xiao shook her head. "He's not there. After checking the entry and exit records, I found that they left the base 2 hours ago. I need to go find them now." Lu Jun and Qiu Lily looked at each other and suddenly didn't know what to say. Lin Xiao watched Tiny Tot being brought into the lake by Little Man. She was a little worried. Fortunately, Little Man had helped Lin Xiaolu awaken once last time, so there shouldn't be any problems this time. Knowing that she couldn't help here, Lin Xiao could only turn around and leave the space. She continued to rush out of the base, hoping to find Yuan Tianqing and the others quickly. Chapter 304. But not long after she turned around and left the base, Little Man's voice suddenly came from the space again. "Mommy, come in, Mommy, come in." Lin Xiao had to come out and immediately went back in. She stood by the lake and asked, "What's wrong, Man?" A vine came out of the lake and wrapped around her hand. "Mommy, come down. Xiao Budian's condition has been suppressed for too long. Now Man can't control it. Mommy, come down and help." Lin Xiao asked in surprise, "What can I do to help?" She wouldn't help others awaken their abilities. Lin Xiao continued to ask, "Didn't you help Xiao Lu awaken last time? Why can't you do it this time?" Man thought about it and said, Last time Sister Xiao Lu's condition was very short. So Man could control her energy, but this time Xiao Budian's condition has been for many days, although I've been suppressing it, but things can go the other way. I've suppressed too much energy. Man is afraid that Xiao Budian's little body can't take it." Lin Xiao heard this and became a bit anxious. "What should I do? Can you do anything if I go down?" Man said, "Mommy, come down. Man will transfer a part of Xiao Budian's energy to Mommy. This will reduce the danger to Xiao Budian." Lin Xiao nodded and said, "Okay then." But she thought for a moment and said, "Wait a moment." Then she turned around and waved at Qiu Lily. "Lily, come here." Qiu Lily and Lu Junzhang were sitting on the sofa watching her. She saw Lin Xiao waving at her. Seeing Lin Xiao waving at her, she immediately got up and flashed to Lin Xiao's side. "What's wrong?" Lin Xiao looked at her and said, "I'm going down to the lake to help Man, so I can't go find Yuan Tianqing and the others. You're a wind type, so you're the fastest. Can you go out and help me stop them?" Qiu Lily knew Yuan Tianqing and the others, and Yuan Tianqing and the others also knew Qiu Lily. So Lin Xiao felt that if she couldn't go, it would be better for Qiu Lily to go, because she was a wind ability zombie, and now she was level 7. Her speed was at least several times faster than her own car. He could fly directly from the top of the tree. Qiu Lily thought about it and nodded. "Okay, I'll go." "Oh woo, I'm going too." At this moment, Ming, who had been hiding in Subspace 3, suddenly jumped out and hid behind Qiu Lily. At the same time, he carefully stared at the little vine in the lake. Lin Xiao nodded and said, "There's no time to lose. I'll send you out now." Saying that, she immediately pulled the 2 zombie girls out of the space, then let go of them and came back in. As soon as Qiu Lily came out, she immediately leaped to the top of the tallest tree around. Ming looked at her from the ground. Then, the 2 of them flashed away one after the other. After entering the space, Lin Xiao wanted to take off his clothes. Suddenly, he thought of something and turned around. She saw a few heads poking out from the small space to look at her. "All of you, go in." Lin Xiao shouted at them and continued, "If you dare to look at me undressing, I'll let little man drag you into the lake." As soon as she finished speaking, The heads disappeared without a trace. Lin Xiao felt relieved and took off his clothes, then stepped into the water. When Lin Xiao was undressing, Lu Jun covered Tong Tong's eyes and carried him to the side. After Lin Xiao entered the water, she felt the energy in the lake surging. When she was in the deep water, Little Man wrapped a vine as thick as a baby's arm around her waist and dragged her down. Under the water, Lin Xiao saw that Little Man's vines had wrapped a small human cocoon underneath. The human cocoon was reflecting a strong light. The white light shone from inside the human cocoon, turning the human cocoon into a shining white egg. It looked very cute, but Lin Xiao felt a surge of energy inside. It gave her a sense of danger, although it wasn't very strong. But from Xiao Budian's point of view, it was very dangerous. At this time, Little Man stretched out another 5 or 6 vines and skillfully wrapped Lin Xiao up. Then, he pulled the 2 human cocoons together. After that, Lin Xiao began to feel a surge of energy slowly passing to her body. On the other side, Wu Chengyue sent Xiao Liqing to investigate Yang Chao's recent actions to see if he had sent people to harm Lingling. At the same time, he sent others to check the list of people coming in and out of the base for the past few days. If there were any suspicious people, they would make a list and give it to him. "Where are you going?" Hearing Wu Chengyue say he was going to find someone, Mengyu followed behind him and asked in confusion. "Special Area C," Wu Chengyue replied. "Special Area C? Are you from Leader Feng's side?" Mengyu asked curiously. The base was divided into 3 areas, Special Area A, B, and C, where the officials or people with status lived and worked. The outer area was divided into 7 areas, from A to F. Each area had a living area, work area, administrative area, and so on. Special Area A was where Wu Chengyue was, and it was also the inner area he was in charge of. Special Area B was Yang Chao's area, and Special Area C was Fan Shihui's area. So when Wu Chengyue said he was going to Special Area C, everyone knew he was going to find Fan Shihui's people. This was because the people who lived in Special Area C were basically his subordinates, and some of the ordinary staff who worked for him. When they reached the lobby on the 1st floor of the office building, Wu Chengyue asked Mengyu to ask if Lu Tianyi was in his office. A few minutes later, Mengyu came back. "Lu Tianyi is not in the office. He went to the shed in the plantation area. We need to go there to find him." Wu Chengyue turned and walked away. To the slums. The so-called plantation area was the area where 90% of the food in the entire base came from. In other words, it was the area where farms, crops, and animals were raised. Special Zone C was mostly made up of farmland and vegetable fields. But because there were not many people, and the land and water needed metahumans to let the plants grow normally, the harvest was not very good. If they wanted a good harvest, they could only find Logia metahumans to help them grow. But there were too few Logia metahumans. Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming were watering the plants in the vegetable shed while helping them grow. Suddenly, someone ran over from the entrance of the vegetable shed and shouted to the 2. "Captain, Leader Wu is looking for you." Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming turned around and saw his subordinates at the workbench. "Why is Leader Wu looking for you?" Kong Qingming turned to look at Lu Tianyi and asked curiously. Lu Tianyi also shook his head with a blank look. "How would I know? Just go out and take a look." As he said that, he wrapped his hands in a ball of water and rubbed them together. Kong Qingming also leaned over and stretched out his hands that were covered in mud and grass. "Give me some too." Lu Tianyi raised one of his hands and placed a ball of clean water on top of his hands, palm facing downwards. Kong Qingming washed his hands in the ball of water that did not fall, and the 2 walked out of the vegetable shed together. Chapter 305. There was a simple pergola outside the vegetable shed, which was used to shelter from the sun and rest. At this time, Wu Chengyue and the others were standing in the pergola, looking around at the surrounding crops. Lu Tianyi and Wu Chengyue came out of the vegetable shed and walked towards them. "Leader Wu, what's the matter? Do you need to come to the shanty area to find me?" he said to Wu Chengyue. In fact, it was quite far from Special Area A to the shanty area in Special Area C. It would take half an hour to walk there. And it was noon, when the sun was very hot. Wu Chengyue turned around and saw him, then looked around. Seeing that there was no one else, he said, I want to ask you, how much do you know about the woman named Lin in Hangzhou? Lu Tianyi looked at him in surprise and asked strangely, Hey, why are you asking about her? He thought to himself, could it be that Leader Wu already knows that the big sister is Lu Tianyu? Now he came to ask me for information, and was he going to deal with her? Thinking of this, Lu Tiany's heart sank slightly, but there was no change in his expression. At this time, Wu Chengyue took out a note and handed it to him. He said, I want you to help me see if this handwriting is hers. Lu Tianyi took the note curiously, but when he looked at it, he found that it was an unfamiliar handwriting. He knew what Lu Tianyu's handwriting looked like, but it was definitely not as sharp and imposing as the one in his hand. It was not the handwriting of the same person at all. Lu Tianyi asked doubtfully, Who wrote this? I don't know. And what's the matter with the content? Was Miss Lingling taken away again? He couldn't be blamed for using the word again, because everyone in the base knew that Lingling was often taken away by bad people. And then she came back safe and sound. It was amazing. Wu Chengyue's expression faded slightly, and he said, This is the note she left. I want to know now, what's your relationship with her, and how much do you know about her? What kind of person is she? She's not a person. Lu Tianyi replied silently in his heart, but he said with a smile, Hey, are you sure this was left by her? Also, please tell me where Miss Lingling was taken away from. Wu Chengyue said, The other party has the space and can come and go without a trace. Other than the woman I met last time, the only one who could successfully kidnap Lingling without leaving a trace was the woman I met last time. No one has ever done it before. Not only did that woman steal his zombie core silently, but from this point, he could feel that it was the same way as this time. On the way here, Wu Chengyue calmed down and analyzed. The more he thought about the space ability user he met in Hangzhou, the closer he felt he was. If it was really her, she wouldn't harm Lingling this time since she had already saved Lingling once. However, he couldn't understand why someone would steal Lingling from his house. What a strange woman. If you wanted to save my daughter, why didn't you just tell me first? Would it kill you to die? Did they want to scare him to death by suddenly taking him away? After thinking it through, Wu Chengyue felt relieved. As long as the other party was not one of Yang Chao's men, there shouldn't be any big problems. So now he had to figure out something else. Lu Tianyi listened to what he said and thought it made sense. He suddenly muttered to himself in a low voice, So, she's back in the base? Wu Chengyue and the others looked at him, not understanding what Lu Tianyi meant. Since you know her, you should know why she took Lingling away, right? I want to say, with Lingling's current condition, whether it's a doctor or a healing ability user, it's useless. That woman called Lin, what can she do? Lu Tianyi looked up at him, the lake in Lin Xiao's space flashing in his mind. She has a magical lake. Actually, I don't know what method she used to help Miss Lingling, and I don't know what Miss Lingling's condition is. It's hard for me to say. Lu Tianyi pointed to the content on the paper and continued, and she seems to know Miss Lingling's condition very well. Even you can't do anything? Wu Chengyue looked around and confirmed that there was no one suspicious. Then he said to him, Lingling suddenly awakened her ability on the day she returned to the base. It was a special kind of water that we asked for from someone else that suppressed Lingling's condition. But after so many days, Lingling's condition hasn't improved. But fortunately, it hasn't worsened. Hearing Wu Chengyue's words, Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming both widened their eyes and blurted out in disbelief, What? Awakened? Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming looked at each other and confirmed that they really didn't hear wrong before saying, How could it be? Miss Lingling is still so young. How could she awaken her ability? Wu Chengyue sighed and asked him, I also want to know the answer to this question. But that woman called Lin took Lingling away. Where are we going to find her now? Lu Tianyi looked at him blankly and said, Leader, to be honest, I don't know either. Actually, she told me before that she wouldn't come back to High City. Now that she suddenly appeared, I don't even know what the situation is. Maybe we can only find out when we find her in person. He heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Fortunately, this Wu Chengyue didn't discover his sister's identity. Hearing Lu Tianyi's words, Wu Chengyue's heart sank. But his handsome face didn't show anything. At this moment, Xiao Liqing ran over from afar. Leader, I found it. The others immediately looked at him. Xiao Liqing looked at Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming and hesitated for a moment. Wu Qingyue said, "It's okay, you can say it." Xiao Liqing took out a piece of paper with some names and information written on it. He said, "A group of people came back this morning. It's Chen Yuding and his team members from the Wind Court team. But his other team leader, Lu Changfeng, his sister Lu Ting, and 2 other team members were not seen. Besides them, there's another team with them. The leader is called Lin Feng, and he seems to be looking for the previous deputy leader Yuan." Wu Qingyue and Meng Yu looked at him in surprise. "What did you say? Lin Feng? Is he also from the original Netherworld King's base?" Lu Tianyi didn't know about Yuan Tianqing and Lin Feng and looked at Kong Qingming blankly. Kong Qingming knew a little about Yuan Tianqing and the Netherworld King's base. He said, "Huh? Is it the Yuan Tianqing who posted a mission to go to the center of Kong State to build a base? I heard that the treatment he gave was very good, but the location was in the center of Zombie City. So many people went to consult him, but there were also many people who came back." Only then did Lu Tianyi understand a little. However, what was the relationship between his sister and these people from the original Netherworld King's base? Chapter 306. Hearing Xiao Liqing's words, Wu Qingyue took the list and looked at it. Sure enough, there were several people with the surname Lin on the list. Huh, why are they in the base? Didn't they say that someone had already attacked them outside? Also, Yuan Tianqing and the others left the base in the morning. Why didn't we meet them on the way? Only Wu Qingyue and Liang Dashu knew that Yang Chao had found people to attack Yuan Tianqing and his comrades. The others didn't know. Hearing this, they immediately felt that something was wrong. Xiao Liqing said, "Maybe they didn't take the same route. As for why Lin Feng's team appeared here, I'm not sure yet. At the moment, I'm not sure, but at least I can confirm that they weren't attacked like you said, leader. Or perhaps, they were attacked, but they couldn't do anything to them." Wu Qingyue looked at the list and wanted to match the name of the woman named Lin with the name on the list. But everyone's age was recorded on the list, so Wu Qingyue found that only a girl named Lin Wanwen was more likely. "Is this Lin Wanwen in the base now?" He pointed to Lin Wanwen on the list and asked. If it was really this person, she shouldn't be in the base. If she was in the base, then was Lingling with her? Xiao Liqing nodded and said, "She is in the base. None of the people who came in have left." Wu Qingyue's expression darkened, and he turned to look at him. "Do you think this woman is still in the base?" Xiao Liqing nodded. He suddenly thought of something and continued, "Right? Huang Ming is back, and he's with Lin Feng's team. Li Zheng and the others who left with Huang Ming's team are also with him." Wu Qingyue said in surprise, "They found Lin Feng's team?" Xiao Liqing said, "They should have. Otherwise, they wouldn't have returned to the base together." Wu Qingyue immediately turned around and said, "Go find Lin Wanwan and meet these people." Then, he left with the others. Thus, Lu Tianyi, who was called out for no reason and didn't understand the situation. Just like that, he watched in bewilderment as Wu Qingyue quickly left with his men to look for the woman named Lin Wanwan. However, Lu Tianyi was puzzled. What did those people from the Netherworld King's base have to do with his sister? Just because of the word Lin? Lu Tianyi thought that Lin Xiao had said the word Lin to fool Wu Qingyue. It was just that he didn't expect Wu Qingyue to associate this word with a group of people from other places. Kong Qingming, who had been observing from the beginning to the end, placed his left hand across his chest. With his right elbow against his left palm, he rubbed his chin while curiously watching Wu Qingyue and the others leave in a hurry. Looks like someone is stirring up trouble, and it actually involved Chief Wu. However, it shouldn't really be the one from your family, right? After all, she really did have space. This possibility was very high. Lu Tianyi. How would I know? Kong Qingming loosened his grip and clapped his hands. He said, "I'll go and investigate the situation. I'll leave the rest to you." With that said, he reached out and patted Lu Tianyi on the shoulder, and then chased after Wu Qingyue and the others. Lu Tianyi, who was thrown down to do additional work. Did he have to be so brazen just to watch the show? At this time, Lin Xiao, who was still in the space, felt an external energy entering her body. At the same time, there was also a suction force that was drawing out the ability in her mind. Because she believed that Little Man wouldn't harm her, she let the suction force draw out her energy. Little Man drew Lin Xiao's energy to her side, and then used her own energy to separate the violent energy in Tiny Tot's body. Most of Tiny Tot's energy converged into her little head, and a large portion was conducted by Little Man, and then transferred to Lin Xiao's body. Without Lin Xiao as a transition body, the energy in Tiny Tot's body would probably explode. Even if Little Man could try to help her guide it out, it was too dangerous. If she didn't control it well, it would cause Tiny Tot's energy to explode. On the other side, Yuan Tianqing and the others drove 2 modified off-road vehicles out of Shanghai and entered Jiaxing City. Halfway through the journey, the people who were driving were suddenly intercepted by a white figure that descended from the sky. Gee! There was a sudden braking sound, and Du Yuanqing's forehead almost hit the steering wheel. The other people in the car also rolled forward, and then swayed left and right. Ouch! My neck! I say, old Du, can't you give me a heads-up in advance? Lin Yu, who was at the back, hit the back of Du Yuanqing's seat. Then he tilted his head and said with a grin, "Fuck, do you think I want to?" The car is still driving, it's 80 miles per hour, and suddenly a person ran out and blocked the front of the car. "It's already very good that I can step on the brakes," Du Yuanqing said with a frightened face. As a result, when he saw the white figure in front of the car, he said in surprise, "Huh? Isn't that Qiu Lily?" "Who is Qiu Lily?" Lin Yu, who was at the back, twisted his neck and asked. But Yuan Tianqing, who was in the front passenger seat, immediately opened the door and got out. Seeing Yuan Tianqing get out, Du Yuanqing and the others also got out. Xiao Yunlong, who was at the back, stopped the car 2 meters behind Yuan Tianqing's car, and then the people in the car also opened the door and got out. When Yuan Tianqing saw Qiu Lily, the expression on his face was very happy. He hurriedly walked in front of her, looked at her anxiously and asked, "Why are you here? Where are Lin Feng and the others?" Qiu Lily looked at him excitedly coming over and took 2 steps back. Seeing her action, Yuan Tianqing finally reacted. He remembered that Qiu Lily did not like to be close to them. "You don't have to go back, because the person you were looking for is now in Sea City base." Qiu Lily stared at him with a pair of beautiful black and red eyes. With that, she leaped onto the roof of the car that Yuan Tianqing and the others were in. Following her movement, the others also turned their heads and shifted their gaze to the roof of the car. Yuan Tianqing was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He looked up at her in surprise and said, "You mean, Lin Feng and the others have already arrived at Sea City base? How come I didn't know?" Qiu Lily played with her 2 long black hair as she replied, "They arrived half an hour ago. At that time, you had already left the base for almost 2 hours. So I came to chase you back." Hearing her say this, Yuan Tianqing's heart that had been in his throat finally relaxed. He said, "So, Lin Feng and the others are all right?" Qiu Lily shook her head. "They're fine." Yuan Tianqing breathed a sigh of relief and said, "That's great." I originally heard the news that someone was preparing to deal with Lin Feng and the others. I was afraid that something would happen to them, so I wanted to go back and see the situation first. I didn't expect you to arrive at the base first. Qiu Lily shook her head and said, "Well, I've already stopped them. You guys quickly turn around and go back." As she spoke, she suddenly turned her head and stuck her tongue out at Xiao Zulong, who was on the other side. She made a face at him, then disappeared in a flash. Chapter 307. Xiao Yunlong, who was grimaced, he silently put away the faintly flashing ability in his hand, then walked to Yuan Tianqing's side and asked him with a dumbfounded look, "If I'm not wrong, her eyes." It was a pair of zombie eyes, and the pupil in the middle was a ruby red. This was a zombie king that was at least level 6 or above. Yuan Tianqing then noticed Xiao Yunlong's current state. He saw that his whole body was tense, and was probably ready to make a move when he saw Qiu Lily. But he probably saw him talking to Qiu Lily, so he held back. "Oh, relax, relax. Don't worry, she won't hurt us," Yuan Tianqing hurriedly said to him with a smile. Xiao Yunlong still looked at him in surprise and said, "You mean, she's real?" It's not really what he thought, but she can talk. I must have guessed wrong. Yuan Tianqing looked at the surprised and confused expression of the tall man and said with a smile, "Yes, it's what you think. But I'm suddenly relieved to see her. Her appearance here means that Lin Feng and the others are really fine." Because he heard Yin Fengyu say that Yang Chao secretly sent people, the other side would certainly not just send 1 or 2 people. And the strength of the people sent would certainly not be lower than a level 6 ability user. So Lin Feng and the others really did not have the strength to resist. Even if he thought of Lin Xiao and Qiu Lili, Yuan Tianqing was still very worried. Because it was easy to dodge a spear in the open, but difficult to guard against a stab in the dark. If the other side took advantage of their inattention to launch a sneak attack, then Qiu Lili might not be able to defend herself. And Lin Xiao also went to the central area of Hangzhou, and it was not known if he had returned. Therefore, the strongest people around Lin Feng and Qiu Lili were Lin Feng and Qiu Lili. If it was 1 or 2 level 6 ability users, then Lin Feng and the others could still deal with it. But thinking that Yang Chao colluded with the robbers outside, these people had too many means, their strength was certainly not too low, and they were some fierce and cruel people. People who could survive for a long time outside the end of the world were still very dangerous. Xiao Yunlong's face was still full of confusion. "You said, she is who I think? Are you sure?" Yuan Tianqing nodded and said, "Yes, she is a level 6 zombie king. But, so she could speak? Didn't you just say before?" Xiao Yunlong stared at him, and then at his subordinates. He said, "Why are you all discussing here so calmly? Don't you think talking zombies, very magical?" Xiao Yunlong also had the same expression as his subordinates in the car. Yuan Tianqing smiled and nodded. "Oh, yeah. It was amazing. But we've already been shocked, half a month ago. All right, we should turn around." With that, he reached out and patted Xiao Yunlong on the shoulder, then turned around and got in the car. Du Yuanxing and the others immediately retreated back into the car. Then, they started the car and turned around, leaving Xiao Yunlong with an expression of, "Oh my God, how could there be such a thing?" He turned to look at his men in the car. "I think we should go back and revise our worldview." Everyone in the car nodded in unison. At that moment, Yuan Tianqing's car turned around and stopped next to him. "By the way, about Lily, I hope Deputy Leader Xiao and everyone won't spread it out for the time being. I believe it won't be long before everyone knows of their existence." Yuan Tianqing stuck his head out of the front passenger window and said to Xiao Yunlong. Xiao Yunlong came back to his senses and asked him with some puzzlement, "Won't be long? Why?" Yuan Tianqing just smiled and then retreated back into the car without saying anything. The car stirred up a cloud of dust and then drove off in the direction it came from. Xiao Yunlong blankly watched Yuan Tianqing's car leave, and then turned back to look at his people again. Then he turned around and got into the car. "I think I need some time alone." On the other side, Lin Xiao did not know how long it had been. She only felt that her whole body was burning hot and very uncomfortable. The energy in her mind was constantly being drawn away by Little Man, and there was another energy entering her body from the other side. But as time went by, Lin Xiao suddenly felt that there was a strange force coming in along with the energy that entered her body. Lin Xiao felt that if she was not mistaken, it seemed to be a kind of vitality. This discovery made Lin Xiao jump in fright. Could this be Tiny Tot's vitality? How could her vitality spread to her side? Moreover, now that Tiny Tot's vitality was on her side, would something happen to Tiny Tot? Just as Lin Xiao was feeling anxious, she felt that this vitality had stopped. The energy from before also stopped. Then Lin Xiao felt that there was a sudden surge of energy around her, and then instantly shrank back. After the surroundings calmed down, Little Man's vines slowly loosened her, leaving only one around her waist. Lin Xiao opened her eyes and saw the little person opposite her. Tiny Tot's eyes were closed, her long hair fluttering in the water. A faint crystal on her forehead was disappearing. It should be said that it had sunk under the skin of her forehead. At this time, Little Man's voice came, "Mama, take Tiny Tot up. Little Man is tired. Little Man wants to sleep." Then Lin Xiao felt that her body and Tiny Tot's body were lifted up and then came out of the water. After Little Man lifted them out of the water, she let go of the two people. Then the vine tentacles retracted into the bottom of the lake. Lin Xiao quickly carried Tiny Tot over and then swam towards the shore with her. On the shore, Lu Jun was waiting with 2 big bath towels. After Lin Xiao carried Tiny Tot out of the water, she covered Tiny Tot with a bath towel. Then she picked up another one and covered Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao handed Tiny Tot to Lu Jun and said, "She's fine now. You take her to bed first." Lu Jun took Tiny Tot, but did not immediately turn around and leave. Instead, she looked at Lin Xiao with a blank face. Lin Xiao wrapped the bath towel around her body, preparing to wipe the water off her body. Seeing Lu Jun's expression, she stopped and looked at her. "What's wrong?" Lu Jun moved her nose closer to Lin Xiao's body and sniffed. Then she said, "It feels a little strange. I don't know if there's something wrong with my nose." Lin Xiao was baffled by her actions. She raised her arm and sniffed herself like she had done. She didn't find anything wrong. "What's wrong? You have a puzzled expression on your face." Lu Jun took a step back, looked at her, and thought for a moment. Then she replied, "Your strength has increased again. I feel that it's not a good thing for you to grow too fast." Lin Xiao felt the energy in her body and nodded. The energy is a little unstable." Chapter 308. Maybe it was because the energy in her mind had just been transferred from Tiny Tot, and she didn't have much energy left. That was why the new energy was surging very actively in her mind, causing an unstable situation. Lu Jun turned around and carried Tiny Tot to the sofa. She still had a confused expression on her face. She didn't say that there was another problem with Lin Xiao's unstable energy. It was that her aura had changed again. There was a strange smell in her original aura. This smell was different from the zombie smell on Lin Xiao's body. It seemed to have a kind of vitality in it, but it didn't smell like a living person's. And judging from Lin Xiao's reaction just now, she didn't seem to notice this. Also, Lin Xiao's smell was a bit like Tiny Tot's. Lin Xiao looked at her back in confusion. Then, she smelled herself strangely and began to put on her clothes. After quickly putting on her clothes, Lin Xiao walked over. "How long have we been down there?" Lu Jun looked at Tong Tong, who was sitting next to her and playing happily, so she let him play. Then, she held Tiny Tot and dried his hair. Hearing Lin Xiao's question, Lu Jun looked at the watch in her hand and said, "Almost 3 days." Hearing this, Lin Xiao was a little surprised. 3 days have passed? So long? No wonder little man is so tired that she wants to sleep. Lu Jun nodded. Then Lily and the others should be back, right? It seems that I should return Tiny Tot first. I only left a note when I brought her in. I don't know what that man will do." Lin Xiao suddenly thought that Xiao Lily and the others had brought people back, so they probably wouldn't enter the base. Thinking about this, she walked to the sofa and watched Lu Jun dry Tiny Tot's dripping hair. Although it wasn't dry, at least it wasn't dripping anymore. Tiny Tot was fine now, but he hadn't slept yet. He would probably be fine once he woke up. Lin Xiao walked to the wardrobe, found a bigger t-shirt, and put it on Tiny Tot. "I'll go out and bring Lily in first, then send Tiny Tot back." Lu Jun looked at her and nodded. Lin Xiao turned around and went out in a flash. Then, she turned invisible and went up to a building outside. He stood on the rooftop and tried to sense Qiu Lily and Mengming's location. Then, he leaped out of the building towards them. Qiu Lily and Mengming were not far away. At most, they were a few hundred meters away from the base's walls. Because one of them could turn invisible, and the other was too powerful, she could retract her aura. Even the 3 level 7 arcanists in the base would not be able to sense them. Soon, Lin Xiao arrived in front of them. Qiu Lily and Mengming were squatting on the roof of a building, silently counting ants in the corridor on the top floor. "I don't know what happened to Ah Qiao. He went in for so long. It's been 3 days, and he still hasn't come out." Qiu Lily said with a pout as she held a small branch and chased a straggler back into the group. "Roar, she brought her little sister inside," Mengming suddenly said. Qiu Lily said, "Well, I don't know who that little guy is. Why did Ah Qiao save her?" "Roar, roar, I've seen this little girl before. The little sister that she had snatched away last time," Mengming said angrily. Qiu Lily looked at her strangely. When did you get together with that little girl again?" However, Ming Ming did not say anything. She just silently stared at the ants walking on the ground. Question mark. Qiu Lily looked at her blankly. Seeing that Ming Ming did not say anything, she could only lower her head and continue counting the ants. In the end, she saw that the one that she had just rushed back had run out again. Lin Xiao appeared in front of them and said, "She's the one that kidnapped that little guy when I went to Hangzhou last time. If I hadn't seen it, I don't know how much suffering that little guy would have suffered with her." As soon as she appeared, Qiu Lily and Ming Ming immediately turned around. Then, they directly jumped up from the ground. "Wow, you're finally out. You've become stronger again," Qiu Lily said happily when she saw her. Then, she circled around Lin Xiao twice with slight confusion. Looking her up and down, Lin Xiao nodded and raised her hand to show her claws. She said, "You can say that, but I don't seem to have increased my level. But I feel that my body's strength has indeed increased again." As she said that, she suddenly waved her hand outside. Woo, a whistling sound that cut through the air rang out. Then, they saw that in the direction that Lin Xiao waved her hand, the corner of another building suddenly tilted and slowly slid down. Boom! The corner of the building fell from the sky and then smashed onto the ground. It was smashed into pieces and sent up a cloud of dust. Lin Xiao visually estimated the distance between the building and her current position. It was at least 20 meters away. Qiu Lily and Ming Ming also looked at her in shock, then looked at the building that was missing a corner. The piece that was missing from the roof was very smooth. It was like a giant knife that had sliced off a piece of tofu. "Your claw is no longer a zombie's claw. But why can your claw cut so far and mine can't?" Qiu Lily looked at her with a face full of envy. Then she also extended her claw and waved it outwards. In the end, there was nothing. Ming Ming also imitated her actions and waved her hand, but the result was the same. There was nothing. At this time, Lin Xiao turned her claw over and her palm faced upwards. A wisp of black qi rose from his palm and spread into a small cloud of black mist. It floated above her palm. Seeing the black fog that Lin Xiao had released, even though it was only a small ball, Lin Xiao's eyes widened. However, Ming Ming and Qiu Lily subconsciously took 2 steps back, distancing themselves from the black, mist-like presence in her hand. Ming Ming hid behind Qiu Lily. Lin Xiao herself did not feel threatened by the black mist. She looked at the two in front of her and subconsciously retreated. He asked, "Is it really that scary?" After saying that, she retracted the black mist. Qiu Lily said, "You should catch a level 6 zombie king and try it. Then you'll know." With that, she and Lin Xiao looked at Ming Ming, who was behind her. "Roar! No, don't grab me." Meng Ming's hair stood on end when she was stared at by them. In a flash, she disappeared without a trace. Lin Xiao closed his eyes slightly and saw a ball of green energy quickly flash outside. She opened her eyes and said to Ming Ming, "Okay, I'm going to take Lily into the space. If you keep hiding, I won't care about you." Qiu Lily knew that Ming Ming could become invisible, but she did not expect that Lin Xiao could see Ming Ming after she became invisible. "You can see her?" Lin Xiao nodded.
Yes.
However, Ming Ming did not immediately run back. Instead, she squatted on another building and looked in her direction. Lin Xiao was too lazy to care about the naughty child. She had just said something casually and ran so far away. She asked Qiu Lily, "By the way, are you on Tianqing and the others in the base now?" Qiu Lily nodded and said, "Yes, I saw them go in." Chapter 309. After confirming that Yuan Tianqing had returned, Lin Xiao nodded and said, "All right, I'll bring you into the space. Come." She pulled Qiu Lily into the space, then came out in stealth mode and quietly moved to Ming Ming's side. Then, when she was not paying attention, she suddenly pulled her into the space. After bringing Qiu Lily and Ming Ming into the space, Lin Xiao came out again. She stealthily sneaked toward the direction of the base, then slipped into the small door at the entrance of the base without anyone knowing. The entrance of the base was not always closed. During the day, a small door would be open, and it would only close at night. A large number of soldiers were stationed around the entrance, and more than 3 rank 5 metahumans were assigned to watch the door. There was also more than one entrance in the entire base. There were 4 entrances in the north, south, east, and west. Above the entrance, there was a high sentry post. The people on guard were also metahumans, and all of them were rank 4 nature-type metahumans. Because nature-type metahumans had stronger senses, they would be able to detect any movement outside the base in time. Unless it was a rank 5 zombie leader or a rank 6 king, it would be impossible to escape the detection of a rank 4 nature-type metahuman. But rank 5 and rank 6 zombies were highly intelligent and would not randomly come to the base. Because there were many metahumans in the base, and there were even rank 7 metahumans here. So even if there was a small door open, with so many metahumans guarding it, the high-level zombies did not dare to approach. Because when the base was first built, there were still many high-level zombies who risked their lives for the living in the base after the zombies were wiped out. But in the end, they were all killed and their zombie cores were taken. Gradually, the high-level zombies learned their lesson and did not dare to go anymore. After entering the base, Lin Xiao went in the direction of the smell coming from Lin Feng and the others. When he arrived, he found out that they were in a small district in Area D. However, Lin Xiao saw countless soldiers standing below Lin Feng's building. Why were there so many soldiers guarding the civilian area? Lin Xiao passed through the soldiers as if there was no one around and went upstairs. When he reached the floor where Lin Feng and the others were, he realized that the soldiers were coming for them. There were a few suites on this floor, and Lin Feng and the others lived in 2 of the suites. There were several armed soldiers standing at the entrance of the 2 suites. He carried his gun and stood guard there. What was going on? Lin Xiao did not understand. Where did these soldiers come from? What are you waiting here for? The doors to Lin Feng's room were closed. Lin Xiao leaned against the door and listened to the movements inside. Xiao Lu, go get a glass of water. It was Cheng Wangshue's voice. Oh, Lin Xiaolu responded. It's almost time to eat. The pancakes are ready. Lin Hao, take these to the opposite room. Mrs. Lin's voice comes. Are those soldiers still guarding outside? This was Lin Hao's voice. I think so, but that man's daughter went missing. Why do you think we did it? And the person he's looking for seems to be Miss Lu, right? Lin Wenwen replied. Who knows? Miss Lu hasn't come back yet. No one knows if she took the daughter away. Mrs. Lin said, this is someone else's base, and he's the boss here. Whatever he says is true. But who is the Lin he's talking about? Lin Hao said, from Leader Wu's description, it does seem like Miss Lu. She has space and can be invisible. And she left because of an emergency? Lin Feng's voice came. But speaking of which, Yuan Tianqing and the others are back. Where did Miss Lu and the others go? Lin Xiao then realized that these soldiers were left behind by Wu Chengyue. She turned to listen to the opposite door and heard Yuan Tianqing, Du Yuanxing, and Lu Junjie talking inside. At this moment, the door of the Lin's room opened and Lin Xiao immediately dodged to the side. Seeing Lin Hao open the door, the surrounding soldiers just glanced at him. They didn't do anything. Lin Hao glanced at them, then walked to the opposite room and knocked on the door. Soon, the door was opened. It was Lin Yu who opened the door and saw Lin Hao outside. Wow, there's food. In the next second, his eyes were glued to the plate in Lin Hao's hand. Lin Hao handed it to him. Take it. My mom made it. Lin Yu happily took it and said, thank you, madam. Her cooking has always been great. It smells so good. Lin Hao waved at him and then turned around to go back. Lin Yu took the plate and closed the door. Lin Xiao looked at Lin Hao who had returned to this room and then looked at Lin Yu's door. And why did Wu Chengyue send people to guard here? It didn't seem like he wanted to restrict their feelings. Looking at the accommodation here, the houses were much better than ordinary people's, and they were living in suites. Although it wasn't the level of an apartment, this small district was still very good. However, although these districts had elevators, because of the lack of power, the elevators were all in a state of strike. The people who lived here could only take the stairs. Lin Xiao thought about it, and guessed that Wu Chengyue must have checked the list of people who went in and out of the base that day. Then he saw Lin Feng and the others, so he suspected them. Wu Chengyue's guess was not wrong. His suspicion was right. It was just that Lin Xiao didn't expect that it would take more than 3 days for him and little man to awaken Tiny Tot's ability. Thinking about it, 3 days had passed. Wu Chengyue should be going crazy, right? At this time, Lin Xiao suddenly felt someone coming up the stairs. She knew this breath. It was the deputy leader under Wu Chengyue. After a while, she saw Xiao Yunlong come up with a few subordinates. Then he went directly to the Lin family's house. Deputy leader. Seeing Xiao Yunlong coming, several soldiers at the door immediately greeted him. Xiao Yunlong nodded to them, then blocked the door of Lin Feng's room, raised his hand and knocked on the door. The door was quickly opened, and it was Lin Hao who came to open the door. He was holding a pancake in his hand, putting it in his mouth while opening the door. When he saw Xiao Yunlong at the door, his expression froze for a moment. Hello. Our leader wants to invite Mr. Lin Feng over. I don't know if it's convenient. Xiao Yunlong stood outside the door looking down at him and said with a smile. After Lin Hao heard his words, he turned back and shouted into the house. Brother, Leader Wu invites you over. The people who were preparing to eat at the table all stopped for a moment and looked silently at the door. Lin Feng stood up from the sofa and said to Mrs. Lin, Mom, you eat first. I'll go over. With that, he walked out of the door. Please wait a moment. Seeing Lin Feng come out, Xiao Yunlong suddenly said. Then he turned and walked to the door of Yuan Tianqing's room and knocked on the door. Lin Feng silently watched Xiao Yunlong knock on the door and then invited Yuan Tianqing out. Then he invited the two of them downstairs. Chapter 310. Lin Xiao silently followed behind them and saw that there was a car parked upstairs. Xiao Yunlong invited Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing to the back seat. Then he got into the front passenger seat and the car drove towards the inner area. Lin Xiao jumped and gently landed on the roof of the car. I don't know if Leader Wu is looking for us because there is news of Miss Lingling? Yuan Tianqing, who was familiar with Xiao Yunlong, asked. Xiao Yunlong replied in front. Not yet. I invited you two over today just for a meal. It's been 3 days. I don't know how Lingling is now. I hope nothing has happened. Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing looked at each other and Yuan Tianqing said, Who took Miss Lingling away? Leader Wu hasn't found any news? Xiao Yunlong looked back at him and said, There are some clues, but the problem is that we can't find the target. We can't find any trace of that person. Yuan Tianqing said, If the person you are talking about is really the person we know, then Miss Lingling will certainly be fine. Lin Feng asked at this time. I want to ask, what happened to Miss Lingling? He always felt that this Wu Chengyue, when his daughter was taken away, did not seem to be worried about what would happen to her, but worried that something would happen to his daughter. Yuan Tianqing and Xiao Yunlong looked at each other. They had not revealed that Lingling was in a state of awakening, so Lin Feng did not know the situation. Xiao Yunlong glanced at Yuan Tianqing, then said to Lin Feng, Because Lingling began to awaken her ability a few days ago, because Mr. Yuan gave Lingling some special water to drink. She has been suppressing it and did not continue to awaken. But after you came that day, Miss Lingling disappeared. Although he left behind a note, Lin Feng asked in surprise, Note? What note? Yuan Tianqing also looked at Xiao Yunlong blankly. He had not heard of any note before. Xiao Yunlong took out his mobile phone and showed the photo of the note. After the end of the world, all satellites could not be used, and there was no signal all over the world. So the mobile phone was useless. At least there was no communication function. But some games that could be played without the internet could still be played after downloading. There were also some downloaded movies that could be watched. In addition to these, many functions of the mobile phone could still be used. For example, taking pictures. Do you recognize the words she wrote? Xiao Yunlong asked as he passed the photo on his mobile phone to the back. Lin Feng and Zhang Xian craned their necks to take a look and realized that the handwriting on the screen was indeed very familiar. Is it really her? Xiao Yunlong immediately turned to stare at the two people, asking, Are you sure? Are you two together? Lin Feng said, If you had taken this out earlier, you wouldn't have had to investigate anything. It is indeed her. Xiao Yunlong said, Who is she? Who are they? Yuan Tianqing looked at Lin Feng, then turned to Xiao Yunlong and said, She is not human. Xiao Yunlong was taken aback, and then looked at the two of them blankly. Suddenly, He thought of the girl with 2 long ponytails who suddenly appeared in front of their car 3 days ago. His eyes widened slightly as he looked at Yuan Tianqing in shock. No way. You mean, she's also that? Yuan Tianqing looked at the driver and didn't say anything. Lin Feng looked at the two of them in confusion. Yuan Tianqing said to him, "He has seen Xiao Lily." With that, Lin Feng immediately understood. Owen nodded. Xiao Yunlong looked at Lin Feng's reaction and immediately knew that Lin Feng also knew the situation. You wait a minute. What is your relationship with those, them? And you even brought them into the base. Lin Feng said, if they want to come in, no one can stop them. Even if you 3 leaders work together, you can't find her. Besides, they are not bad. After that, he and Yuan Tianqing looked at each other, understanding in their hearts. Since it was Lin Xiao who took Lingling away, there must be no problem. And if it is an awakened ability, Lin Feng suddenly said, "Hey, did you say before that Miss Lingling has awakened her ability? If that is the case, there is no need to worry. She really has a way." Xiao Yunlong's mind was a little confused at this time, and now he suddenly heard Lin Feng say this. He looked at Lin Feng with some confusion and asked, "What do you mean?" Lin Feng said, if it is an awakened ability, she may be able to help Lingling pass smoothly. Xiao Yunlong and Yuan Tianqing both looked at him with a puzzled expression. Lin Feng said, "You also know my daughter. In fact, she has also awakened her ability. Not long ago." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the 2 people looking at him in surprise. Yuan Tianqing stared at him with a look of disbelief and asked, "Is what you said true? Why didn't I know?" Lin Feng said, "I told everyone not to disclose this matter, so you didn't know." The expression on Xiao Yunlong's face slowly changed from surprise to shock, and then to surprise. He looked at Lin Feng incredulously. "Is what you said true? Your daughter has really awakened her ability?" Lin Feng nodded and said, I hope Deputy Leader Xiao won't spread this matter. And it is that person who helped. Only she can do this. So she took Miss Lingling away and said she was helping. She must be helping Miss Lingling. I can guarantee it." Xiao Yunlong saw that he was so sure and turned back happily. "That's great. If that's the case, I'm relieved. But who is that person you were talking about?" As he spoke, he looked back at the 2 people behind him. Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing looked at each other and said at the same time, "You will know when the time comes." Xiao Yunlong looked at them in confusion. 10 minutes later, the car drove into the Special A area of the inner district and then drove all the way to Wu Chengyue's house. When they got off the car, they saw that Xiao Liqing was already waiting at the gate. "The food is ready, waiting for you." He came over with a smile. Xiao Yunlong immediately took the 2 people in and led them directly in the direction of the dining room. Wu Chengyue rolled up his sleeves and served the dishes. Meng Yu's figure was walking in the kitchen. "You 2 are here? Come, come, come. The time is just right. This is the last dish. Please sit down." Wu Chengyue put the last big bowl of soup on the table, and then together with Xiao Yunlong, pulled out a chair for Yuan Tianqing and Lin Feng. Yuan Tianqing and Lin Feng looked at each other, sat down and said politely, "Thank you." Wu Chengyue said with a faint smile, "Why are you so polite? I had said before that I would treat you to a meal, but I have been too busy these days." When he finished, he also pulled out the main seat and sat down. Xiao Yunlong pulled out another chair and sat down. Then he looked in the direction of the kitchen. Chapter 311. The 4 people did not notice that Lin Xiao quietly walked to the table. Then she bent down to smell the dishes on the table. But when it came to cooked food, she couldn't smell anything. At this time, Yuan Tianqing said, "Leader Wu, you didn't invite us here for a simple meal." Xiao Yunlong took the soup bowls in front of them and began to serve them soup. Wu Chengyue heard this and said with a faint smile, "I do have something to ask you, but we can talk while eating. Come, drink the soup first, or it won't taste good when it's cold." Seeing Xiao Yunlong serve them soup, Wu Chengyue said. Yuan Tianqing and Yuan Tianqing had to drink the soup first. "Well, the soup is good." Lin Xiao saw that they were eating and wanted to hear some information, but she couldn't hear it for the time being. She turned into the space and saw Lu Jun put Xiao Buddy in on the bed. Xiao Budian had not woken up, lying flat. He was covered with a quilt. Tong Tong might be tired from playing and had fallen asleep on the sofa. Lin Xiao went to the bed and touched Xiao Budian's hair, which was already dry. It was probably Xiedong who helped her dry it. Xiedong had no sense of existence, but in fact he was also in the space. Of course, when Lin Xiao took off her clothes and went into the water, he silently ran into the woods. Lin Xiao picked up Xiao Budian. Seeing her movements, Lu Jun asked, "Are you going out?" Lin Xiao nodded. At this time, Wu Chengyue, Yuan Tianxing and others were eating lukewarm, because Wu Chengyue didn't speak. Finally, Lin Feng and Yuan Tianxing, who had been holding back for a while, spoke first. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to eat peacefully. "Leader Wu, if you don't say it, then let us talk first. Just now Deputy Leader Xiao has already shown us the handwriting on that note, and we do recognize who wrote those words," Lin Feng said. Wu Chengyue's hand paused, turning to look at Xiao Yunlong. Xiao Yunlong nodded his head. "She's with you? But I checked the base's entry and exit records, and there is no name of her." Wu Chengyue turned to look at Lin Feng and said doubtfully. He had compared all the names on the list of suspicious people, and all of them matched up. But he didn't see the woman's name. Did she not register when she came in? After thinking about it, Wu Chengyue remembered that Lin Xiao could turn invisible. All right, if the other party had entered invisibly, then there was indeed no need to register. However, being invisible did not mean that he would disappear. When he passed through the door, he would still be detected by various instruments. Body temperature, heartbeat, and breathing would all cause the detector to fluctuate. Then how did the other party get in? Or jump over a 7 or 8 meter high wall? Yuan Tianxing said, "We're on the same side." However, she was invisible. Wherever he goes, he appears and disappears like a ghost. Wu Chengyue put away the indifference on his face and said worriedly, "But why did she sneak in and take the child away? Does she really have a way to help Lingling get through this?" Yuan Tianxing turned to face Lin Feng. Lin Feng glanced at him and said to Wu Chengyue, "She does have a way. My daughter, Xiao Lu, also awakened her ability not long ago, and it was her who helped her successfully awaken it. Although I only saw it once, I don't know if Miss Lingling's situation is the same as my Xiao Lu's. However, it's always better to believe in hope than to be disappointed." Wu Chengyue looked at him in shock. "Wait, did you just say that your daughter also awakened her ability? Is that true?" Of course, he knew that Lin Feng's daughter, Lin Xiaolu, was only 2 years older than Lingling. However, the problem was, how did Lin Feng's daughter awaken her ability at such a young age? This was already the second, no, Lingling was the second child that he knew of to awaken her ability. What was going on? How did a child awaken her ability at such a young age? Lin Feng nodded. "Yes, although I don't know the reason. However, we discovered it the moment Xiao Lu awakened. Then, it was the person who left you the note that helped Xiao Lu get through this." Yuan Tianxing said to Wu Chengyue, "So you can rest assured now. Since she took Lingling away, she must be confident." Wu Chengyue calmed himself down and couldn't help but ask curiously, "Who is this person you're talking about?" At this moment, Lin Feng looked at him strangely and said, "Actually, you already know her. Didn't you ask us if we've seen a short-haired woman wearing a hat and sunglasses? That's her. It's just that the name you mentioned is different from what we know. That's why we're not sure if you're talking about the same person." Wu Chengyue asked, "Isn't her name Lin?" She said it herself. "You've seen the note. Isn't it her signature?" Thinking of the word Lin on the note, Lin Feng and Yuan Tianxing both had a strange feeling in their hearts. "Are you talking about me?" Suddenly, a hoarse voice came from the side. Hence, they were stunned for a second before turning their heads to look in the direction of the voice. Then they saw a woman wearing a hat and sunglasses standing 2 or 3 meters away from them. Her face could not be seen clearly. She was carrying a child in her arms. Bam! Wu Chengyue stood up abruptly. The chair swayed from his movement and made a sound. Lingling. He immediately recognized that the child in the woman's arms was his precious daughter. Seeing that he was about to rush over, Lin Xiao suddenly took 2 steps back. "Hey, wait, let's make this clear first. I've returned your daughter to you in one piece. She's not sick or in trouble. She's just asleep now, She won't wake up in another 1 or 2 hours. If you dare to touch me again, I'll take Tiny away next time. Wu Chengyue stopped in his tracks because of what she said. Listening to what she said, it was a little normal at the beginning. Why did she start threatening him later on? Hey, when did you come back? How's Miss Lingling? Yeah, how's Lingling? Yuan Tianqing and Lin Feng immediately came to the rescue and looked at Lin Xiao in surprise. I've never left. I was just outside the base, Lin Xiao said as she slowly walked over to Wu Chengyue and passed the child to him. She also had to be in case this person suddenly struck her with lightning. It wasn't the first time anyway. Wu Chengyue quickly carried the child over and touched Lingling's forehead and neck. There was a pulse, and her body temperature had returned to normal. Her chest was also moving up and down gently. After checking that there was nothing wrong with his daughter, Wu Chengyue's heart was finally at ease. Hearing what Lin Xiao said, this woman clearly didn't get the point. How's Lingling's condition now? He raised his head and looked at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao rolled her eyes at him and said, You'll know when Tiny wakes up. As she said that, her figure flashed. She disappeared on the spot. At this moment, Meng Yu walked to Wu Chengyue's side and held little Yueling's hand to carefully feel it. She realized that there was indeed nothing wrong with little Yueling's body. Lingling seems to be fine, she said as she looked up at Wu Chengyue. Chapter 312. Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing looked at each other and said, Why do I feel that Miss Lu has been here for a long time? Yuan Tianqing nodded and asked, When did she come back? Wu Chengyue was walking to the living room with Lingling in his arms when he heard their conversation. He stopped and turned around to ask, Her surname is Lu? Lin Feng nodded and was about to reply, Oh, her name is Lu. Suddenly, Yuan Tianqing interrupted him strangely. That's right. Her surname is Lu. That's right. Lin Feng looked at him with a baffled expression. However, they had known each other for so long. However, he could tell that there was something fishy going on when Yuan Tianqing interrupted him. Wu Chengyue looked at Yuan Tianqing suspiciously and saw that the man was smiling as if it was an accident. At this moment, Lingling's eyelids moved and she slowly opened. Wu Chengyue, who was looking at Yuan Tianqing, didn't notice, but Meng Yu, who was next to him, did. Look, Lingling is awake. Everyone immediately looked at Wu Chengyue's arms. As expected, Wu Yueling opened her eyes and was looking around blankly. However, when she saw everyone looking at her, she immediately turned her head and burrowed into Wu Chengyue's arms. Lingling? Lingling, come, look at Daddy. Tell Daddy if you feel uncomfortable. Wu Chengyue looked at her in surprise and hurriedly carried her to the sofa. Wu Yueling peeked out from his arms and looked at him with her bright eyes before burrowing back into his arms. He saw that his daughter was awake, and there was nothing wrong with her reaction. Wu Chengyue heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, Wu Yueling suddenly felt around her body with her hands, but she didn't feel anything. Then, she sat up from Wu Chengyue's arms and sat on his lap, looking down at her clothes in confusion. It's not my clothes? It's so big, however. Wu Yueling soon forgot about her clothes. She searched around her body and found that her baby was gone. So she started looking left and right. Sometimes, she went around to Wu Chengyue's left and then to his right. She didn't see anything. Realizing that her baby was not in the living room, Wu Yueling pouted and knocked her face. She raised her head and looked at Wu Chengyue with tears in her eyes. What is she looking for? Lin Feng still understood children. After all, he also had a daughter. She should be looking for her grass dragonfly, Wu Chengyue said after thinking for a moment. After he said that, he saw Wu Yueling nodding her head vigorously. Wu Chengyue said with a smile, Don't worry, your treasure is in your room. Are you hungry? Let's go up and change first, then come down to eat. Okay? Hearing that she was going back to her room, she would be able to see her grass dragonfly. Wu Yueling immediately nodded cheerfully. Wu Chengyue lovingly stroked her long hair. Stroking his daughter's smooth, black hair, he felt as if his heart was filled with something. Oh, I'll bring Lingling upstairs to change first. Yunlong, invite Mr. Lin and Mr. Yuan to the dining table again. Xiao Yunlong watched as Wu Chengyue stood up with Wu Yueling in his arms, and immediately nodded his head. Oh, Both of you, please go to the table and sit down first. We haven't finished eating yet, Xiao Yunlong said and gestured in the direction of the dining table. Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing were relieved to see that Wu Yueling had been returned in good condition. The two of them smiled and consciously walked towards the dining table after Wu Chengyue finished speaking. Hey, why did Miss Lu leave as soon as she came? Yuan Tianqing asked curiously. Are you sure she left? Lin Feng looked at him strangely. At this time, Xiao Yunlong also asked curiously. Yes, that Miss Lu really woke Lingling up. And, did little Lingling really awaken her special ability? Lin Feng said, You have to ask your Miss Lingling to know. Maybe we can ask when we go back. Yuan Tianqing said at this time, but the security in Leader Wu's house still needs to be strengthened. Just let her come and go without a trace, okay? At this time, Mingyu, who had followed them to the dining table without saying a word, suddenly said, If even I and brother you can't find her, then it's useless to add more guards. The three men were stunned for a moment, thinking that the person had appeared silently beside them with Lingling, and no one present had noticed. In this way, it was indeed useless to strengthen the security. Xiao Yunlong said, If she is sent to gather intelligence or assassinate, if she is not very strong, who can stop her? While they were curious about the success rate of Lin Xiao's sneak attack and assassination, Wu Chengyue carried Lingling upstairs. Lingling? Do you remember anything? Wu Chengyue asked as he walked to the room on the third floor. Wu Yueling sat in his arms and looked at him blankly. Wu Chengyue saw her expression and knew that she didn't know anything. He opened the door of Wu Yueling's room and walked in. Then he put her on the bed and turned to the wardrobe to find clothes. As soon as Wu Yueling sat on the bed, she immediately turned and climbed to the table. There was a greenish-yellow grass dragonfly on the table beside the head of the table. She stretched out her little hand to pick up the grass dragonfly and smiled happily. Wu Chengyue just finished looking for clothes and saw Wu Yueling sitting on the bed, both hands holding the grass dragonfly, a bright smile on her cute little face. He hadn't seen his daughter smile so sweetly for a long time. Wu Chengyue felt something melting in his heart. Holding the clothes in his hand, he didn't want to disturb her. On the other side, Lin Xiao had just entered the space and hadn't reached the furniture area on Lu Jun's side. She had just taken 2 steps when her feet suddenly sank, and then there was a small tug on the bottom of her trousers. And Lin Xiao looked down and saw a large ball of gray hair curled up on her feet, but it was using its rabbit lips to bite her trousers. Oh, it's a gray rabbit. Seeing Lin Xiao looking down at herself, the gray rabbit immediately released her trousers. Then it jumped down from her feet and then bounced around her feet. What are you doing? Lin Xiao looked at the rabbit blankly, not knowing what it was doing. And, although she could hear the thoughts of zombies, or perhaps she could also sense the thoughts of humans, but she couldn't hear the thoughts of small animals. At this time, a small figure ran over and excitedly ran towards the little rabbit. Lin Xiao saw that it was Tong Tong, and then saw Lu Jun walking over from behind. Maybe Tong Tong's running startled the gray rabbit. It was anxious and fiercely bit Lin Xiao's trousers and dragged her to the side. This time, it used several times more strength than before. Does it want you to take it out? It was just staying by that little girl's side, and when you ran away, it started running around. I don't know what it's doing. Chapter 313. Lin Xiao looked at the gray rabbit, then looked up at Lu Jun and said, No way? Lu Jun just shrugged and said, I'm just guessing. Lin Xiao glanced at the gray rabbit and then picked it up. At this time, Tong Tong stood at her feet and looked up at her. I want to hold the rabbit. Lin Xiao glanced at him and bent down to put the rabbit in his arms. However, the gray fur ball didn't seem to like him and struggled hard in his arms. Tong Tong couldn't hold it firmly, and the gray fur ball jumped out after a few tries. Lin Xiao thought about it and closed her eyes to look outside. She went out in a flash. She stood in front of the living room and dining room of Wu Chengyue's house, which was also the place where she returned Lingling to Wu Chengyue. She sniffed and found that Wu Chengyue and Tiny Tot were upstairs. So she turned around and walked to the stairs then looked back at the people eating in the dining room. Her figure flashed, and she entered the space again. Then she picked up the gray fur ball that was being chased by Tong Tong and flashed out again. After putting the gray fur ball on the stairs, Lin Xiao turned around and walked out of Wu Chengyue's house. Then she went to Lin Feng's house. When Wu Chengyue carried Wu Yueling, who was dressed down, Wu Chengyue saw a big fur ball squatting on the stairs. Huh, what is this? Hearing Wu Chengyue's curious voice, Wu Yueling also looked back and then froze for a moment. But very quickly, she reacted and stretched out her body in the direction of the gray fur ball. Seeing his daughter's reaction, although she didn't show it on her face. However, those sparkling eyes told Wu Chengyue that his daughter wanted that fur ball. Do you know what this is? As soon as Wu Chengyue finished speaking, he saw the fur ball move and then turn around. A rabbit head with 2 long ears looked at Wu Yueling. Ah, isn't this the rabbit I saw last time? Huh, why does this rabbit look a bit like the female zombie's rabbit? Wu Chengyue looked, and it turned out to be a rabbit. And it looked a bit familiar. Wasn't that the one Lingling was carrying when she came out of the space in Congo last time? He didn't care at that time because his mind was on his daughter. It was just a cursory glance. Now that he took a closer look, why did it feel like the one beside the female zombie that he had struck with lightning last time? As he spoke, he put Wu Yueling down. As soon as Wu Yueling landed on the ground, she immediately rushed towards the gray fur ball. The gray fur ball even bounced towards Wu Yueling. Wu Yueling happily picked up the gray furry ball and followed Wu Chengyue down. Lingling, you can't eat with it in your arms. Can you put it on the chair next to you? After sitting on the chair, everyone looked curiously at the rabbit in Lingling's arms. Wu Chengyue pulled an empty chair beside her and said to her, Miss, isn't this the gray rabbit in Miss Lu's space? Why is it here? Lin Feng said in surprise. Wu Chengyue watched as his daughter obediently placed the gray rabbit on an empty chair, then said, we saw it when we were coming down from the stairs just now. This was her rabbit, but why would she leave it for Lingling? It's her rabbit, but why did she leave it for Lingling? Lin Feng said, I've seen this rabbit in her space. I feel that it's living a comfortable life there. Wu Chengyue sat next to Wu Yueling and picked up some food from the bowl Meng Yu gave her. Wu Yueling ate with a fork and chopsticks while looking at the fur ball. I have a question. I suddenly thought of it when I saw the rabbit. Meng Yu, have you seen this rabbit before? Wu Chengyue suddenly said, then turned to Meng Yu and asked. Meng Yu stared at the rabbit for a while and shook her head. Have I seen it before? I don't seem to remember. Wu Chengyue reminded her, 2 months ago, Lingling was abducted by someone. Then we found her in a farm. Lingling was also holding a gray rabbit. It was just a little smaller. Think about it. Hearing this, Meng Yu's expression froze for a moment. Then her eyes lit up and she nodded. Oh yes, there was indeed a rabbit at that time. Lingling didn't want to part with it. After saying that, she stared at the gray-furred ball in front of her, which was much bigger than before. Now that you mention it, it really does look like it. Wu Chengyue turned to look at Yuan Tianqing and the others. He asked Lin Feng, I want to ask that woman just now. She doesn't seem human. Yuan Tianqing, Lin Feng, Xiao Yunlong and Meng Yu were all taken aback. Yuan Tianqing and the others knew about it. Meng Yu was caught off guard. She looked at Wu Chengyue in surprise. Although she thought about the female zombie, she didn't expect Wu Chengyue to say it in front of 2 outsiders. Seeing Lin Feng and the others stunned, Wu Chengyue smiled and said, No wonder she always wears sunglasses and her voice is hoarse. At that time, I felt that apart from her zombie appearance, she didn't look like a zombie at all. I didn't expect her to be able to speak now. It's only been 2 months and she's evolved so fast. Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing were also surprised at this time. Hey, have you seen her before? Xiao Yunlong also remembered the zombie and suddenly said, By the way, where's her hair? Did she cut it off? Oh, I know. It must be because she was chopped into an afro by you and thought it was ugly so she cut it off. Hearing Xiao Yunlong's last sentence, Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing suddenly looked at Wu Chengyue with a strange expression. Then they looked at each other with the same meaning in their eyes. There's something going on here. Wu Chengyue looked at the two curiously and said with a smile, Now that you mention it, it really seems to be her. I didn't expect her to be with you now. Aren't you afraid? Lin Feng shook his head and said, it was a little scary at first, but she saved every one of us. Therefore, when their savior is a zombie, they will not be able to escape. It feels strange, but the fear gradually disappeared. Because I believe she won't hurt us, so I'm not afraid. But she's really strong. I think the few of us are stronger than her. Except for you, none of us are her opponent. Yuan Tianqing nodded and said, finally glancing at Wu Chengyue, indicating that he should be the one to beat. Xiao Yunlong suddenly said at this time, he lost. After that, he silently looked at Wu Chengyue. The last time they fought without using their abilities, this guy didn't even manage to take off the other's hat, but was instead taken off by the other party. And he didn't have the grace to bite the other's thigh. Wu Chengyue, who was inexplicably despised. Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing didn't react for a while. Chapter 314. On the other side, after Lin Xiao left Wu Qingyue's house, she climbed onto a tree outside and jumped out. She stepped on the electric poles and treetops of other buildings and headed in the direction where Lin Fengji came from. She stopped when she reached the building in Area D. Then, she jumped down from the building. At this time, in an alley not far from the building, someone was being besieged. Chen Yuding, a deputy captain, and several other members were blocked by another group of people in the alley. The people blocking Chen Yuding were actually a deputy captain and his subordinates. This deputy captain was the one who had talked to Tang He before, Yang Chao's right-hand man. He was leaning on the side, standing in a clean position and smoking a cigarette. He was wearing sunglasses and didn't look at Chen Yuding and the others inside. Chen Yuding and the others looked at each other. There was anger, grievance, and fear on their faces. He said, Lu Ting was bitten to death by zombies. I already said not to let that woman go out. Now that she's dead, how can you blame us for not protecting her? Besides, life or death is up to fate outside the base. What can we do now that she's dead? If you didn't want her to die, you shouldn't have let her go out with the team. This deputy captain was called Pu Luotzong. He turned to face Chen Yuding and the others. He put the cigarette in his mouth, took a drag, and took out the cigarette between his fingers. Then the smoke that he had inhaled gushed out of his mouth and nose again. He said calmly, don't find so many excuses. You should know that she's a space ability user. You should know how rare space ability users are. Also, why did Lu Ting and her brother die? What's going on? He's a level 6 water ability user. If he didn't encounter a level 6 or 7 zombie king, how could he not have a chance to escape? He put the cigarette in his mouth again, took a drag, and then blew it out. Do you think it's so easy to encounter level 6 or 7 zombies? Do you think it's that easy to meet level 6 or 7 zombies? And do you think I'm a fool? If you encountered them, how could only a few of them die? You didn't even have a chance to return to the base, and you're still standing here talking to me like this? No, it's not like this. Because there are robbers. Very powerful post-apocalyptic bandits. Hearing that Pu Rukang did not believe them, the deputy captain behind Chen Yuding said anxiously. Pu Xuetsong paused for a moment. Then, he suddenly turned his head and looked at them with a smile. Oh, did they encounter robbers? Then tell us, who are the robbers? What rank of arcana is it? Chen Yuding stared at him and said firmly, yes, we met robbers. Moreover, Lu Ting and 2 young men in our team were taken away by the robbers, and they ran towards Hangzhou. We also chased, but when we caught up with them, those robbers were killed by the zombies. In order to increase the credibility of Lu Yuding's words, the people around him nodded at the same time. Yes, that's right. When we arrived, the robbers were all dead, but their leaders seemed to have escaped. Lu Ting was also killed there. No matter what, you let her die. I told you, I can't let her die. Since you said she died in the hands of zombies, then I will believe you. I won't let you die, and killing is not allowed in the base. I just want an arm from each of you. Pu Xuetsong put the last puff of the cigarette in his mouth and flicked the butt to the side. As soon as he finished speaking, the people around him moved. They moved towards Chen Yuding and the others. Seeing 7 or 8 level 4 and level 5 arcanists walking towards them, Chen Yuding and the others panicked. They immediately put on a defensive posture. They only had one level 6 and one level 5, and the others were all level 3. Even if Chen Yuding could deal with Pu Xuetsong, the others were no match for Pu Xuetsong's men. Lin Xiao looked at Chen Yuding strangely. She clearly killed Lu Ting herself. Why did she lie? Moreover, the bespectacled man was so domineering as if no one cared about him when he said that he wanted someone's arm. It seemed that this person's position in the base was not low, and he was also a level 6 arcanist. Deputy Leader Pu, if you really want to fight, then I will accompany you. But if you use Lu Ting's death as a reason to deal with us, I will not accept it. Pu Xuetsong sneered and said, even if you are right, so what? Lu Ting is also my woman. I haven't played enough with her, and you let her die. Are you going to compensate me with such a beautiful woman? After saying that, he suddenly waved his hand, and a flame burst out from the heads of Chen Yuding and the others, then quickly expanded and pressed down. The extremely high temperature immediately made Chen Yuding and the others feel like their hair was about to burn. Chen Yuding reacted quickly and raised his hand. A layer of cement and soil suddenly extended from the surrounding walls, and then covered the top of their heads, isolating the flame above. The flame did not disappear when it hit the layer of cement and soil. Instead, it surged down into the gap next to it. Pu Xuetsong's men did not follow suit, but stood to the side and watched. Seeing the fire pit drilling down, the extremely high temperature caused the surrounding air to burn up. Chen Yuding's team members with lower-level arcanists immediately felt it difficult to breathe, as if they were about to suffocate. Moreover, they were surrounded by walls, and they did not have time to escape. They were already dizzy from the suffocation. The attack of a level 6 arcanist was not something that level 2 or 3 arcanists like them could withstand. Pu Xuetsong's flame was not only hot, but it also carried fire poison. So even if Chen Yuding used his earth ability to block the direct attack of the flame in time, the fire poison still filled the air. Chen Yuding raised his hands, and the cement on the ground split open. A mud wall rose from the ground and quickly blocked the surrounding gap, preventing the flame from invading. At the same time, the ground under their feet began to sink. When it reached a height of 2 meters, he created a passage on the ground next to them. Go into the cave, quickly. The deputy captain, who was in a better state, immediately helped the weakest one up and walked into his passage. The other two also struggled to get up and walked in with their hands on the mud wall. Do you think you can leave by going underground? At that moment, Pu Xuetsong said coldly and said to the person next to him, release the snake. Then, one of them suddenly raised his leg and kicked the mud wall that Chen Yuding had created with all his might. Bang! The mud wall was more than 10 centimeters thick. However, it was still easily kicked out by this person. Then, another person waved his hand, and a snake as thick as a finger slid out from his hand. When it fell to the ground, it quickly split into countless snakes, all of them crawling toward the hole. As the snakes crawled, they grew in size and split again. Chapter 315. However, Chen Yuding quickly blocked the hole created by Pu Croang's attack. Then, his skin quickly turned into a layer of dry stone skin in the dark, and a stone wall immediately grew to block the hole. The black snakes that Pu Rukang's men released were immediately trapped around Chen Yuding. Chen Yuding was also a level 6 ability user, so Pu Rukang couldn't do anything to him. Seeing that Chen Yuding was holding on to protect the others, Pu Rukang couldn't do anything to him. After a while, he would also dive into the ground and leave. However, Pu Rukang didn't seem to care at all. He suddenly reached out and retracted the flames, then said indifferently, Chen Yuding, you can escape this time, but let me tell you, you will come find me again. When the time comes, you will give me your arm. After saying that, he turned around and waved to his men. Then, he led them out of the alley. Lin Xiao, who was hanging on the wall, saw Pu Rukang's confident expression. She felt that this man must have something else to say. She looked at Chen Yuding's position and saw that the earth wall around Chen Yuding was slowly retreating. Then, a man who looked like a stone statue was revealed. Who else could it be but Chen Yuding? Soon, Chun Yuting's stone skin returned to normal skin. Then, the ground not far ahead suddenly cracked open, and the deputy captain of the Wind Court team and 3 other team members rose from the ground. However, only the deputy captain was awake. The others were already lying on the ground, unconscious. "Captain, they have been poisoned by fire," the deputy captain said to Chun Yuting anxiously. Chun Yuting immediately ran over and helped the 3 of them up. "Send them to the hospital first." Lin Xiao looked at them, then thought for a moment before turning around and leaving. Half an hour later, Pu Rukang and the others arrived at a place that looked like a refugee area in Area F. The houses here were all 1-story or 2-story houses, and the doors and windows were all broken. Many of the windows were even sealed with wooden boards or strips to prevent the wind from entering at night. It was very shabby and simple. There were many people here, but most of them looked shabby or dirty. Their hair was unkempt, and their faces were sallow and thin. Because they were all civilians, they did not have any special abilities. Looking into those houses from the outside, most of them had no furniture, only 1 or 2 beds or mattresses on the floor. When Pu Rukang walked past with his men, the people who were sitting at the door or leaning against the wall were stunned. They were all clean and armed with pistols or rifles. They all quietened down and silently watched the group of people walk past with their heads held high. They could tell that these people were either from the inner district or the middle district. He couldn't afford to offend them. If he did, he might not even know how he died. Moreover, no one would come to investigate. After walking for about 20 minutes, Pu Xuetsong and his men stopped in front of a row of 2-story buildings. They entered the stairway and ascended. The staircase was dark and dirty. Both sides were littered with trash, sand, and rocks. Only the small path in front of him was clean. What's more, it was trampled on by someone from downstairs. After going to the corridor on the 2nd floor, he saw 2 or 3 men standing in front of a room. When they saw Pu Kiakang and the others coming up, they immediately greeted them respectfully. "Deputy Chief." Pu Xuetsong took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. He took out a cigarette and walked to the door of the room. After standing still, he put the cigarette in his mouth. Someone next to him immediately took out a lighter and lit it for him. After taking a puff, he exhaled the smoke and asked, "Did you bring her?" The 3 men who were originally guarding the door immediately smiled and said, "Yes, we did. It was a bit difficult to go to Chun Yuting's house to catch her, but that woman came out on her own and seemed to be going to the trading market. That's why we caught him on the way. We knocked out the 2 men who followed her and threw them to a deserted place." Pu Xuetsong nodded and said, "Yes. Open the door. You didn't touch her, did you?" The 3 men at the door shook their heads and said, "We wouldn't dare." "Deputy Chief, you said that you can play first. How could we dare to go first? But this woman's figure is really good." As they spoke, they all showed covetous eyes and helped open the door. Pu Xuetsong said with a smile, "That's good. Don't worry. When I'm done playing, there will be a share for you. But when you play, take it easy. Don't play her to death too quickly. This woman is enough for you to play for a long time." The people behind him all revealed excited expressions as they watched him walk in alone. Pu Xuetsong directly closed the door as soon as he went in. This Pu Xuetsong actually caught someone of Chun Yuting's. Judging from his previous conversation with Chun Yuting, it seemed that he just wanted to find an excuse to deal with Chun Yuting. And Lu Ting was probably one of the women he played with. It didn't matter to him whether she was dead or not. The room was very dark. It was a single room, the kind that didn't even have a bathroom. There was only a window in the back, but it was also sealed. It was also empty inside. There was only a bed with a shabby quilt on it. A woman was sitting in the corner of the bed with her hands and feet tied. Her mouth was also sealed. She saw the door open and a strange man come in. The woman immediately looked at him in horror and couldn't help but shrink back. Ugh, ugh, ugh. She shook her head randomly. Her eyes were full of fear and panic. She had heard the conversation at the door just now. She knew what this man was going to do to her after coming in. Pu Xuetsong stood at the door, smoking while the light came in through the gap in the window. He looked at the woman on the bed. This woman wasn't beautiful. Her facial features weren't delicate enough, but they were still decent. Her legs, which were shrunk in front of her, were very long. Pu Xuetsong put the cigarette in his mouth and walked to the side of the bed. Ugh! The woman immediately shook her head in fear and shrank back. She wanted to shrink into the wall behind her 10,000 times. But soon, the man bent down to grab her foot and dragged her out forcefully. Ugh! The woman was so scared by the hand on her foot that tears came out. Her scream was sealed in her mouth. Hey, this foot is really thin. Do you think it will break if I squeeze it hard? Pu Xuetsong grabbed her foot and dragged it out, asking curiously. Ugh! The woman struggled hard, trying to pull her foot out of his hand. But in Pu Xuetsong's eyes, her strength was nothing. He grabbed the woman's foot and took the cigarette out from the corner of his mouth with the other hand. Then he dragged the woman under his body, bent down, and blew a mouthful of smoke at her frightened and desperate face. Chapter 316. Pu Xuetsong dragged the woman in front of him, bent over and blew a puff of smoke at her. He threw the head aside, reached out his hand, grabbed the woman's collar, and pulled it down. The woman struggled with all her might, kicking her tied legs like a fish. She wanted to get out of the man's control. Pu Xuetsong grabbed her clothes and tore them with great force. Rip! The clothes were soon torn into pieces. The man enjoyed the feeling of tearing the woman's clothes. The woman's face was covered with tears of despair, and she let out muffled moans from her sealed mouth. Pu Xuetsong's hands grasped the two lumps of white, indescribable flesh in front of her. A soft and elastic sensation came from his palm, which was a wonderful and exciting feeling. Pu Xuetsong supported the woman's neck with one hand. Seeing the woman's expression, he suddenly lifted the hand beside her neck and tore off the tape on her mouth. Oh no! No, no! No, please let me go. As soon as the tape on her mouth was released, the woman immediately cried loudly and shrilly. While screaming, she struggled with all her might, trying to get away from this man. Pu Xuetsong said to her with a lustful expression, "Scream, scream, I love to rape women. Only women who know how to resist, have feelings." Hee. With that, he lowered his body, pressing heavily on the woman. "Don't know, stop. Stop, help, someone help me." At this moment, Pu Xuetsong lowered his head, and with a thick stench of cigarette smoke, he hurriedly sealed the woman's mouth. At the same time, his two hands began to work non-stop. The woman only felt a disgusting stench of cigarette smoke rushing into her mouth, and then a slippery tongue rushed through her teeth and stirred into her mouth. At this moment, several people at the door squeezed to the door and put their ears against the door to listen to the sound inside. All of them had an excited expression on their faces. Wow, so intense. This woman's moans are so emotional. Listen, the sound is blocked. The deputy leader must have kissed her. Whether it was the humiliation inside the room or the eavesdropping outside the door, no one could see this floor now. Even if someone passed by downstairs and heard the woman's cries, they would not be able to hear it. He wouldn't poke his nose into other people's business. He would just pretend that he didn't hear anything, or that nothing had happened, and continue on his own path. On the other hand, when Lin Xiao arrived at Lin Feng's residence, she didn't go upstairs. Instead, he climbed through the window, because there was someone guarding the door. After identifying the window of Lin Feng's room, Lin Xiao climbed up in no time. When she reached the top, she sneaked in through the glass window. Mrs. Lin and others are sitting on the sofa in the living room, chatting. Do you guys think it's possible that Lin Feng ate at Leader Wu's place before coming back? It's been half an hour. Cheng Wangxue sat on the sofa and hugged Lin Xiaolu. Mrs. Lin leans against the sofa and crosses her arms in front of her chest. He shook his head and said, I think so. He called Lin Feng away at this time. We definitely have to eat, but we might talk about some things during the meal. Lin Wenwen combed his long hair and asked, What do you want to talk about? Is it about Miss Lu? Mrs. Lin nodded and said, I think so. Otherwise, why would we talk about anything else? Besides, Leader Wu hasn't found his daughter yet. Will he still be in the mood to talk about other things? The others nodded. Lin Xiao walked to an empty chair and sat down. She also nodded. She is still invisible, so no one else can see her. At this time, Lin Wenwen looked at his watch and said, "By the way, it's almost time to go to the task bureau. I wonder if anyone is willing to come today." Saying this, she stands up. As soon as she moves, Lin Hao and Long Qingying move as well. The three of them walk towards the door. Mrs. Lin and Cheng Wangxue, as well as Lu Junjie and the others who are in this room, follow them out. They are Xing Lu and Wei Jingxian. Lin Xiao immediately stands up and follows them out. As soon as they come out, Lin Wenwen runs to the opposite room and knocks on the door. It's time to go to the task bureau. After a while, someone from inside comes to open the door. Du Yuanxing and Li Zheng walk out. "I'm waiting for you." Lin Wenwen turns around and leaves, not looking at the soldiers standing motionless by the door. She says, "Let's go. I want to go to the trading area in the afternoon to see if there is anything I can hand over." Lin Hao looks at her strangely. "You're still going? You went yesterday, the day before that, and the day before that. Have you exchanged everything that needs to be exchanged?" The trading area is actually a place where people take out things that can still be used to exchange for food or other necessities. But many people only want food. Of course, the corpse core can also be exchanged, just like a street stall. In the first 2 days, Lin Wenwen has dragged Long Qingying there several times. She had thought that she would have exchanged enough things since she had been gone for 3 days. Lin Wenwen rolls her eyes at him and says, "What do you know? It's just like Taobao. Maybe I missed something before." A woman's desire to shop is something that most men will not understand. Lin Hao and the other men just looked at her with a baffled expression. Then they go down the stairs. The soldiers at the door don't affect their movements, but 2 of them follow them down. Not long after they walked out of the community, Xiao Yunlong sent Lin Feng and Long Qingying back. At the same time, when he left, he suddenly took the soldiers with him. When Lin Wenwen and the others went to the announcement office, the place where they receive applicants was already filled with people waiting. Although not many, there are still a few. In fact, there is a large electronic announcement screen in the hall, on which there are tasks displayed. But many people will also put up a table in the empty space next to it. Then they will put up an announcement to assign tasks or recruit people. Lin Wenwen and the others walked to the front of their table and saw a few men dressed in very simple clothes standing there somewhat cautiously. After seeing Lin Wenwen and the others come, they all looked at Lin Wenwen and the others timidly. "Then you push me, I push you," but no one dares to come forward to ask questions. "Ah, you are here to look for a job? Are there any skills and requirements?" Lin Wenwen came forward with a smile and said to them. At this time, the one in front was pushed out by his companions. He looked back at the others in a panic. Then when he saw everyone nodding to him, he turned back to look at Lin Wenwen. "We want to ask, ordinary people can do it?" The man asked with some stuttering. Lin Wenwen and the others knew that they were ordinary people. If they were paranormals, they would not have this kind of shrinking posture, nor would they wear old clothes that have not been washed for a long time. He was standing here with a sour stench. Because of their existence, the surrounding paranormals intentionally or unintentionally stayed away from them. Chapter 317. However, Lin Wenwen did not show a disgusted expression. Instead, he smiled and said, "Do you have the strength? Can you carry bricks?" Hearing this question, the men immediately nodded. Lin Wenwen smiled and said, "As long as you have the strength. We're only recruiting people to build walls. We don't necessarily need people with special abilities. But there's one more thing, and that's whether or not you dare to follow us. Don't worry, at least I won't harm you." However, after hearing Lin Wenwen's words, the men hesitated for a while. "Excuse me, is there anything to eat? We don't ask for much. We just want to have a full meal every day." They had been hungry for many days and had nothing to eat. Because half a month ago, their original job at the farm in Zone C was squeezed out. After they got in through their connections, they lost their jobs. They were just ordinary people without special abilities. He didn't know any martial arts, so he wasn't agile enough. No corpse hunting squad would be willing to accept these ordinary people. So even if they left the base to mingle outside, they wouldn't be able to survive. It wouldn't be long before he would die under the bite of the zombies. Lin Wenwen raised his head and glanced at the others. At this time Du Yuanxing said, "Oh, that's for sure. If you dare to come with us, not only will you be able to eat every day, but you will also be able to eat every day. Moreover, it will be the normal 3 meals. If you perform well, they will even give you some rice, flour, and noodles." The few men widened their eyes and looked at Du Yuanxing in disbelief. She then looked at Lin Wenwen and asked, "Really? Really? Can you get rice and noodles?" Lin Wenwen nodded and said, "That's right. But we can't tell you the location now. You'll know when we get there. Let me ask you now, do you dare?" The men looked at each other. He was a little hesitant. At this time, some people who had been watching from the side interrupted, "You don't even let us know the location. 3 meals a day, with rice and noodles? Are you sure you're telling the truth? Even you don't believe it, do you?" "Ha ha ha. That's right. I've been observing this mission for a long time. The conditions you offer seem very attractive, but do you really have rice and noodles for these people who are going with you? Furthermore, you only said that you were going to carry bricks. He didn't say what kind of bricks he was carrying or where he was going to do it. It's just a way to fool these honest people who don't have food to eat." "That's right. Do you think there's rice and face? Would it be difficult to take it out for everyone to see? Only then will they believe your words, right? I just want to know, who are you people? Where did so much precious food come from? Apart from the high-ranking officials in the inner district, who else would have so much rice to give to others? You probably don't even have enough for yourself." I think it's true that they were carrying bricks, but whether or not there was food, whether or not it was rice, we still need to verify it. The surroundings were filled with doubtful voices. Most of the people were stirring up trouble here. When he spoke, he pretended to be loud. Hearing these people's words, the surrounding people all looked over. Their eyes were filled with the expression of watching a good show. Lin Wenwen and the others only glanced at those people indifferently. Du Yuanxing's temper was a bit more jumpy, and he couldn't help but angrily say to those people who were making sarcastic remarks, "What nonsense are you spouting? It's up to you whether you believe it or not, but don't talk like we're all liars, okay?" Lin Hao coldly said, "People like you, even if you wanted to come, we wouldn't want them." Those people just disdainfully smiled and said, "Io, you speak as if it's true. Come, 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 look, they're not even willing to invite us." "What a joke. It's as if we want to go. Ha ha ha, it's true. Hee hee hee, hee hee hee." Mocking laughter came from the surroundings. The few people who were talking to Lin Wenwen earlier, at this moment, also somewhat retreated. We'd better find something else to look at. I'll listen to you." Only the man who was pushed out to talk to Lin Wenwen at the beginning was not affected by the surrounding people. He shook his head and said, "No, I believe it's true. Hey, don't be silly. What if?" The people behind him saw that he actually wanted to follow and anxiously pulled him. Just as he was about to say something, he glanced at Lin Wenwen and suddenly stopped. At this moment, Lin Wenwen just smiled faintly, shook his head, and said, "Are you retarded? Or are you really stupid? What do you think this place is? Is it a street stall outside? Isn't this your appointments bureau? Haven't the rewards and components of every mission been verified? Or is it that your staff or person in charge here, knowing that we are liars, still let us in to swindle and swindle? Or do you think that the staff here are all trash? Don't know anything?" These words of hers successfully shut up the people around her who were making trouble. The originally complacent mocking also froze on her face. Yes, that's right. This was the mechanism structure of the entire base. In other words, the staff here were the subordinates of the leader's subordinates. Therefore, doubting the staff here was equivalent to doubting the leader's subordinates. Doubting his subordinates, wasn't that also doubting the leader? This pot was a bit big. Just now, those people just said a bunch of nonsense for a moment's pleasure. But they didn't expect that this beautiful young woman's mouth was even fiercer than her appearance. This is not what we said. This is what you said." Those who had been complacent just now immediately shrank back. On the other hand, Some people who were standing quietly by the side to watch the show cursed a few idiots. Of course, they were cursing those who were making trouble blindly. Get lost. Lin Hao glared at them coldly. He said, I'll remember all of you. We won't recruit people like you in the future. At this time, Lin Wenwen said to the few ordinary people who wanted to go with them, this is all up to you. We won't force you. If you're willing, you can sign the information here. As she spoke, she pointed to a stack of forms on the recruitment counter. Those men looked at each other again, and it was still the man who refused to back down who said, I'll go first. As he spoke, he walked over, picked up a pen on the table, and began to write. The others were stunned when they saw that he didn't hesitate at all. Then, they slowly followed him and waited for him to finish writing before it was their turn. Can I ask you something? When can we set off? After the man finished writing, he let the others fill in the form. At the same time, they couldn't help but ask Lin Wenwen. Lin Wenwen said, It depends. We need to recruit enough people we want. The man asked, when will that be? Are you going to recruit a lot of people? Lin Wenwen said with a faint smile, We originally planned to recruit 100 people first, but now the situation is like this. We don't know how long it will take to recruit 100 people. Including the 5 people here, there are a total of 40 or 50 people now. So we decided to wait until there are 100 people, and then leave first. We'll send the first batch of people first, and then come back to recruit more people. Chapter 318. At this time, the others behind the man suddenly asked, Can we come back whenever we want? Lin Wenwen nodded with a faint smile. Sure. Yes, but we need to ask for leave. The man looked at Lin Wenwen hesitantly, wanting to say something but hesitating. Lin Wenwen asked him, Do you have any other questions? The man said with an embarrassed expression, Can we leave earlier? Because we need food. Lin Wenwen was stunned, then turned to look at the others. Yuanqing said, But we only have 50 people now. It's a bit too few. It's not easy to travel on the road. It'll take 5 or 6 hours to go back and forth. It's a waste of fuel. Lin Hao, Lin Wenwen, and the others all nodded. They couldn't give food to these people first, so they could only wait. At this time, Lin Wenwen said, How about this? You can go back and see if anyone is willing to come with you. You can find someone to exchange for half a jean of flour, white flour. How about it? As soon as she said this, the 5 men's expressions brightened. Their eyes lit up. Really, really? Lin Wenwen still smiled and nodded. Most of the paranormals were watching from the side, looking doubtful. After getting Lin Wenwen's affirmation, the men who filled out the form left excitedly. Obviously, they wanted to find someone. Lin Wenwen and the others stayed in the mission bureau for another 2 hours, except for the few ordinary people from before. Except for those ordinary people, no one else came. Some just passed by and looked at the information on their bulletin board, then left doubtfully. On the other side, not long after Lin Feng and Du Yuanqing left, someone came to Wu Qingyue's house. Leader, Chen Yuding is looking for you. Xiao Liqing came in and reported to him. Wu Qingyue sat on the sofa reading some information. On the sofa next to him, Meng Yu was holding Wu Yueling and helping her comb her hair. Wu Yueling was holding the gray rabbit in her arms, feeding it a green vegetable leaf in her hand. But the gray furry ball didn't give her face and refused to eat. Invite him in. In fact, the reason why he was so sure that Wu Yueling wasn't taken away by bad people was because he learned about Lin Feng's team from Chen Yuding, and the woman with sunglasses who disappeared as soon as they entered the base. After a while, Chen Yuding walked in alone. Wu Qingyue looked up at him and asked in surprise, Why are you alone? As he spoke, he pointed at the single sofa next to him. Chen Yuding walked to the sofa he pointed at and sat down. Then, he said, I ran into Piao Chotsong on the way here, and we fought. A few of my team members were poisoned by his fire poison, so I went to the hospital first. Wu Qingyue picked up an empty cup on the table to pour water for him. He frowned when he heard this. He turned his head and looked at him. Pu Xuetsong? How did you end up fighting him? Chen Yuding pondered for a while and said, They probably found out about our relationship a long time ago. They'll come looking for trouble over some trivial matters. Wu Chengyue nodded and pushed the cup to him. Yes, I remember that there's a woman in your team who's very close to him. But this time, you let her die outside. He can indeed use this as an excuse. Chen Yuding nodded knowingly and said, I've long expected this. However, that woman could have come safely, but she courted death herself. She can't blame others. As he spoke, he looked at Wu Yueling and asked, Did that woman with sunglasses return Miss Lingling? Wu Chengyue turned his head to look at Lingling and said with a smile, Yes, she suddenly appeared at my house at noon. She returned Lingling to me. Chen Yuding said, We didn't see her when we entered the base that day, so we thought she didn't come in. We didn't expect her to avoid the inspection at the gate and sneak in. But why didn't she come in with Lin Feng and the others? He didn't know that Wu Yueling was taken away by that woman because she had awakened her special ability, but he also knew that the woman had something to do to take Wu Yueling away. 2 days ago, Wu Chengyue suddenly came to the base and asked him if he had seen a woman wearing a hat and sunglasses, with very short hair and a big chest come in with him. In the end, such a woman did come back with them, but she didn't enter the base. After hearing that he wanted to cooperate with that woman, he asked him to tell him the details about that woman. Later, he learned that their leader's little princess had been taken away again. But this time, it seemed that the other party didn't harm the little princess. Because after hearing his description of that strange woman, he seemed to be relieved. Wu Chengyue and Mingyu looked at him curiously and asked, Hey, hearing what you said, that woman must have done something she shouldn't have, right? Chen Yuding nodded and said, The car we drove back to the base was borrowed by Miss Lu, the woman in sunglasses. As a result, Lu Ting became greedy in the middle of the night and asked a member of our team with psychedelic abilities to help her put us all to sleep. They wanted to secretly drive the car away, but they were killed by Miss Lu and her brother, Lu Changfeng. Wu Chengyue said clearly, The Miss Lu you were talking about, she is not a person to be trifled with. I also advise you not to provoke her, otherwise don't blame me for not being able to help you. Chen Yuding nodded repeatedly. Although he had only been with her for a day or two, her momentum was too strong. Moreover, her methods were decisive and neat. She was a dangerous person. Besides, he didn't know her strength. He asked Wu Chengyue curiously and said, Leader, you seem to be very familiar with Miss Lu. How did you know each other? Why did she secretly take Lingling away and not inform you? Wu Chengyue thought of the first time he met that female zombie. Because he was quick enough, he used a grenade to strike her. As a result, she got angry and ran far away with her daughter. He had to chase her for a long time. The second time they met, nothing happened, and she even returned Lingling to him intact. It just let him know one thing, that the zombies in this world, not all had lost their humanity and rationality. Thinking about the last time he saw her, she had changed too much, so he didn't recognize her. As a result, without using his ability, he couldn't even beat her with his hands, and he even bit her. Thinking about that position, thinking of this, Wu Chengyue couldn't help but cover his forehead, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He covered his forehead, waved his hand, and said to Chen Yuding, Oh, no, she still left me a note. It was just that I was too anxious at the time, so I didn't think about it. Besides, I'm not very familiar with her. We just met a few times. Chen Yuding nodded his head. Then he said, That's right. Our hunting team is going to carry bricks with them this time. Leader, don't you think you should transfer some people to go with them? I observed them and found that they really look like they have enough food. And the conditions they gave are not bad. Although I don't know where they got so much food. Wu Chengyue nodded his head, then picked up the 2 documents he was looking at and handed them to him. He said, You should know that they are originally from Hades base, and their work in the mission office is real. But the food you mentioned, it's Miss Lu who is in charge. She has a way to get a lot of food. These are the people I'm going to lend them, and it's almost winter. They also need to store more food, or else they won't have much harvest when the weather gets cold. A lot of ordinary people in the civilian area will starve to death. Chen Yuding took the paper in his hand, looked at him with surprise, and said, Where did she get a lot of food? Wu Chengyue said with a smile, She can go to the zombie city to collect food, and doesn't she have the space? Even I don't dare to go to the downtown area of Hangzhou, so it's not a problem for her to go there. And she should have been an elite soldier in the special forces, so she should have a lot of military knowledge. She should know where to find the place where the government stores food. And this time, their purpose in coming to our base is to recruit a lot of people to build a new base. Although I don't know where they want to build the base, it should be near us. Chun Yuding was surprised, and his eyes slightly widened. He asked, "Base? They want to build a base? Just a few people? No wonder they want us to be construction workers. It seems that they want to build a wall, right?" Wu Qingyue said, "Yes, I thought their leaders were Yuan Tianxing and Lin Feng. Looking at it now, it seems that this Miss Liu has more authority than these two." Chun Yuding nodded in agreement. "Yes, but this Miss Liu is a strange person. I don't see her all day." Wu Qingyue pointed at the two papers in his hand and said, "Just in time. If you go, you can lead the team and take care of them." Chun Yuding looked at the list in his hand. The names, abilities, levels, genders, addresses, and other information of the 300 people were clearly listed. He looked at the number of ability users and asked in surprise, "You're sending so many ability users? Aren't you going to go out of the base to collect supplies?" Wu Qingyue nodded and said, "Well, I don't need so many people here. In fact, I just want to make things convenient for them. After all, Miss Liu did help me a lot this time." Then he turned his head and looked at Lingling. Chun Yuding looked at his movements and understood. He said, "Then I'll tell them about it in the afternoon." Wu Qingyue nodded. Then he stood up and said, "Let's go together. I'm going to the agency building in Area D." Then he walked over to Wu Yueling, then bent down to pick her up and said, "Lingling, let's go out for a walk." Meng Yu held the gray rabbit that jumped out of Wu Yueling's arms. Wu Yueling hugged his neck and just looked at him. There was no reaction. Then they walked out of the house. Chapter 319. In the afternoon, Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying left Lin Hao and Du Yuanxing at the appointment bureau and went to the trading office. Each district had its own trading office. Of course, if one felt that it was not enough, they could go to other districts. The agency building was located in some commercial buildings, and the mission bureau was on one of the floors of the agency building. The security guards, other offices, and so on were all in the agency building. Of course, the trading hall was also in the agency building, and it was on the first, second, and third floors. Because there were too many people in the base, and they were densely packed. In order to make more space for people to live in, the factories and commercial streets were all occupied. Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying went down to the trading area on the first floor and saw that many people had a lot of things that needed to be exchanged, from furniture to daily necessities. These were all practical things, and they sold well. There were also some jewelry, clothes, shoes, bedding, and so on. Many of these things were collected by the mutant teams outside the base, risking their lives to collect them. If they were not willing to hand over the things they collected back to the base, you can carry out the transaction here. Girls only looked at clothes, pants, shoes, and so on, as well as ornaments. Ornaments like jewelry were usually traded by fewer people. Therefore, Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying were watching from the clothing and shoes areas. There were both old and new items, and the prices were different depending on how old they were. Of course, the new ones were very expensive, and the older ones were, the cheaper they were. Lin Wenwen and the two women were followed by 2 or 3 men in camouflage military uniforms with guns in their hands. Therefore, although the two of them were beautiful, most people were very polite to them. But some people were not so sure. "This pair of shoes is the right size for me. I want this pair." When they reached the second floor, Lin Wenwen stood in front of a stall and pointed at a pair of canvas shoes on the table. The stall owner was a man who looked to be in his 30s. He originally looked very lazy as he sat on a chair in front of the stall. However, when he saw the two young women standing in front of his stall, his gaze changed. Especially since Lin Wenwen was very good-looking and had a quiet temperament. He immediately stood up and looked at Lin Wenwen's young face with an infatuated look in his eyes. With a hint of evil in his eyes, he laughed and said, "Oh, beauty, you're so beautiful. Do you have a boyfriend?" The moment the other party opened his mouth, he rudely asked if he had a boyfriend. Lin Wenwen's originally faint smile disappeared. She glanced at the man expressionlessly. The man's gaze made her very uncomfortable. Therefore, the idea of exchanging the shoes immediately disappeared. Ching, let's go to other places to take a look. She turned around and was about to leave with Long Qingying. Hey, don't go yet. Let's chat a little longer. What does it matter? As soon as the man in the stall saw that Lin Wenwen and Su Xiaoxue were about to leave, he immediately appeared in front of them and stretched out his hand to block their path. Get out of my way, Long Qingying said coldly. The man looked at Long Qingying from head to toe, shook his head and said with a disgusted look, Iske. Your body is not bad, but your face is too stinky. You're not even good looking. So why are you pretending to be so virtuous? No matter how virtuous you are, you still have to cry under a man's body. Lin Wenwen frowned slightly. Long Qingying raised her hand and pulled out half of the katana tied to her back. A cold intent pounced on the man. The man took 2 steps back in surprise, but he didn't look panicked. Instead, he said with surprise, Io, don't pull out your katana so easily, okay? You're not allowed to kill people in the base. You have to know this. Seeing that he took 2 steps back, Lin Wenwen immediately raised her foot and prepared to walk around him. Hey, beauty, don't go. You have to know that I've already taken a fancy to you. You have to tell me if you have a man now. If you do, then hurry up and dump him. The man immediately strode over and continued to block Lin Wenwen. At this moment, Wei Jingshen, who had been following behind Lin Wenwen, saw this and immediately went up to block the man. Sorry, please move aside. Wei Jingshen was tall and burly, giving ordinary people a sense of oppression. However, the man didn't care. He slightly raised his chin and said disdainfully, What? Ordinary people? Do you think you're amazing just because you're tall? Do you think I'm afraid of you just because you have a gun? As he spoke, he suddenly raised his hand to push Wei Jingshen. Wei Jingshen's body swayed, and he dodged the man's outstretched hand. Then, in the instant he dodged, he nimbly raised his gun and aimed it at the man, quickly loading it. Lin Wenwen didn't want to cause trouble. She took a step back and turned to walk back. At worst, she could just circle around him from another direction. The man saw that Lin Wenwen was about to turn and leave because of Wei Jingshen's interference. A sharp glint flashed through his eyes. He suddenly reached out, his movements several times faster than Wei Jingshen's. He grabbed Wei Jingshen's gun and forcefully twisted it before Wei Jingshen could react. Then, he twisted the gun out of Wei Jingshen's hands, and it fell to the ground with a clatter. Then, Wei Jingshen's gun left his hand, and he panicked a little. The man's body flashed, and he spun and kicked Wei Jingshen in the stomach. Bam! The 1.9-meter-tall man flew 3 to 4 meters away and crashed into a pillar at the side. This scene happened so quickly that no one could react. Wei Jingshen was easily sent flying by Lu Sheng's kick. The people around them didn't say anything. They just quietly watched from afar. Long Qingying immediately pulled out her knife. So, after the man kicked Wei Jingshen away, he stood still and turned around. Then, a sharp knife was pointed at his throat. He didn't move, but his expression was relaxed. He smiled. Io, do you dare to cut my neck? Do you know who I am? If you dare hurt a hair on my head, I'm telling you, you won't live for more than a few days. Long Qingying narrowed her eyes and was about to move. Suddenly, her hand was quickly grabbed by a hand next to her, preventing her from stabbing the man who looked like a scumbag at first glance. Lin Wenwen grabbed her. Ching, don't be rash. The man smiled at Lin Wenwen. Aya, I won't ask you if you have a man. How about this? You sleep with me tonight, and I'll give you this pair of shoes for free. I'll even give you a set of clothes. You can pick any set here. Lin Wenwen didn't say anything. She directly pulled Long Qingying toward Wei Jingshen. This time, the man didn't continue to hold her back. He just stared at Lin Wenwen's back with an aggressive expression. Chapter 320. How are you? Are you hurt? Lin Wenwen helped Wei Jingshen up. Long Qingying stood by her side and stared at the man. Xinglu and the soldier who had followed them also stood in front of her. Cough, I'm fine. Wei Jingchen stood up, clutching his chest. He coughed and shook his head. Lin Wenwen turned to the soldier who had followed them. Do you know this man? Who is he? This man was very arrogant. Even ordinary ability users wouldn't be so condescending. The soldier turned back to her. He's the younger brother of Leader Yang. His name is Yang Hui. The others immediately looked at him, and a hint of understanding flashed in their eyes. No wonder he dared to tease a woman in public. He had such a powerful backer. Lin Wenwen said, "Let's go. Don't cause trouble." If the other party was an ordinary person, she could have let Long Qingying fight him. But the other party was the younger brother of the leader of this base. If they fought, it would only bring more trouble later on. After all, they couldn't afford to offend the leader of this base. Just as they were about to leave, a little boy, about 7 or 8 years old, suddenly jumped out of nowhere. He quickly ran to Lin Wenwen's side. Because he ran very fast, he just happened to run past Wei Jingchen. Wei Jingchen's chest was still throbbing from the kick just now. Thus, he didn't notice the little boy's approach. Also, because the little boy was relatively short, no one could react. The little boy ran to Lin Wenwen's side and squeezed his way through. Then he reached out to grab Lin Wenwen's skirt and forcefully lifted it up. But when he was halfway through, a hand suddenly appeared out of thin air. A hand clamped down on his wrist. Lin Wenwen, who realized that her skirt was being pulled, was also shocked and cried out involuntarily. Let go of me. Let go." But just as Lin Wenwen finished shouting, a child's voice rang out. Only then did everyone see that a child had suddenly run out to play a prank on Lin Wenwen. But halfway through, a woman suddenly appeared out of nowhere and grabbed his hand. Then she stopped his prank. Lin Wenwen pressed down on her long skirt and took a few steps away from the little boy. She was already irritated by the man, and now she glared at the little boy with shame and anger. Where did this kid come from? Whose house is it? Just as she finished shouting, she saw that the crowd that had gradually gathered to watch the show had opened up a path. A woman in her 30s walked out with an arrogant look on her face, pulling a delicate little girl along with her. The woman raised her free hand and pointed at Lin Xiao, who was holding the little boy. She shouted, "Who are you? Release my Debao." As soon as she spoke, she told everyone. The boy was her child. However, she wasn't apologizing to Lin Wenwen. Instead, she was scolding Lin Xiao, who was holding onto her son. "Apologize first." Before Lin Xiao could speak, Long Qingying spoke up coldly. Whether it was the child or the adult, neither of them felt that they had done anything wrong. This made Lin Wenwen and the others even angrier. "What are you apologizing for? Is my Debao playing with you? That's because he thinks highly of you. Don't be so ungrateful." The woman just smiled indifferently. "You?" Lin Wenwen glared angrily, speechless from the woman's words. If Lin Xiao hadn't suddenly appeared to stop the little boy, by the time she reacted, her skirt would have been flipped up. There were so many people here, and they would all be able to see her underwear. If that was really the case, how could she face others? And now, the other person was even indulging the naughty child's prank without a trace of shame. Instead, she felt that it was only natural. Lin Xiao held on to the little boy, but she knew what he was thinking. She frowned and said to Lin Wenwen, "This child was ordered by the adult." Lin Wenwen was stunned when he heard her words. Lin Xiao looked at the woman who was still pointing at her and said, "It was that woman who told him to do this." "What?" Lin Wenwen's eyes widened. He looked at her in disbelief, and then at the woman. "Let me go. It hurts." Woo Woo, the naughty child, who had been twisting his wrist, suddenly cried and angrily shouted at Lin Xiao. Then, he turned to the woman and shouted, "Mom, my hand is going to be broken by her. It hurts. You transvestite, let go of my son. Do you hear me?" The woman saw that her son looked like he was in pain and became anxious. Lin Xiao nodded and said, "Okay." Then, she suddenly lifted her hand and threw him with force. The naughty child was thrown out of the window more than 10 meters away. Debao! She didn't think that Lin Xiao would dare to throw the child out of the window. The woman was scared out of her wits. She let go of the little girl and rushed toward the window. This was the second floor. If a child was thrown by Lin Xiao like that, he would either be dead or crippled. Everyone was so shocked by her actions that they couldn't react at all. Moreover, the window was very far from here. How did this woman with sunglasses do it? The moment the naughty child was thrown out, Lin Xiao also moved. She instantly flashed to the window and reached out her hand. At the same time, she grabbed the naughty child's collar. Then, the naughty child was lifted out of the window by her hand. Awawawawa, Mom, Uncle, hurry and save me. The naughty child immediately cried out in fear. He hung outside the window and didn't dare to move. Debao! The woman screamed and ran over. At the same time, the man who teased Lin Wanwan just now also rushed over. Don't move. If you come any closer, I'll let go. Lin Xiao suddenly reached out her hand to stop them when they were almost in front of her. You! Hurry and give Debao back to me. Give my Debao back to me. The woman and the man called Yang Hui immediately stopped. The woman looked at her son who was being held outside the window by Lin Xiao with a face full of fear. Yang Hui looked at Lin Xiao with a face full of anger. How dare you? Do you know who this child is? If anything happens to him, the few of you here won't be enough to pay for it. Yang Hui didn't think that Lin Xiao would be so arrogant and dare to cause more trouble than him. He and this woman both relied on the fact that they had the support of the leader. No one in the base dared to touch them. The way they did things had always been so condescending and tyrannical. However, the moment Lin Xiao came, he actually dared to make a move on the leader's nephew. As expected, as soon as he finished speaking, there was the sound of running. Everyone turned around. Immediately, they saw 10 to 20 soldiers in the base's military uniform rush over. They surrounded Lin Wanwan and Lin Xiao and pointed their guns at them. Chapter 321. Seeing that these soldiers dared to point their guns at her, Long Qingying was angry to begin with, and she immediately exploded. She raised her hand, and the guns in the hands of these soldiers suddenly became distorted. Then, they flew out of their hands and gathered above Long Qingying and the others. Then, they began to break down into finger-thick icicles that pointed at the soldiers. But she still didn't shoot them. Lin Xiao used a hoarse voice and said to the woman, "What? Encouraging a child not to be harassed by strangers? Is this how your family teaches children?" Then, she suddenly turned to look at Yang Hui and changed her expression into one of understanding. "Oh, that's right. All the adults in your family are like this. They don't expect to teach children well, because the kind of family has the kind of upbringing. Dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and mice give birth to children that can dig holes. I'm not sure if you've heard of this before." "Ah, Mom. The naughty child outside was still calling his mom in fear, but Lin Xiao had no intention of letting him in. "I'm telling you, if you dare to hurt my son, I won't let any of you go. Quickly let my son in." The woman roared at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao looked at her, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He sneered at her. "You mean, you want me to let go now? Sure, I welcome your leader to come and settle the score with us." Then, she shook her hand. "Ah!" This shake immediately scared the naughty child outside. The crotch of his pants was immediately wet, and a pale yellow liquid was dripping down. "No, stop." At the same time, the woman's expression changed. Lin Xiao pointed at Lin Wanwan and said to the two who looked like brother and sister, "Apologize to her. Otherwise, don't even think about getting your son back." Yang Hui and his sister looked at each other and then turned to Lin Wanwan unwillingly. He gritted his teeth and said, "Sorry." "What did you say?" "It's too far. I can't hear you." Lin Wanwan had already suppressed his emotions at this time and put away the expression on his face. He said calmly. Lin Xiao immediately shouted louder, "Didn't you eat?" Then, the two of them glared angrily, and the veins on their foreheads almost popped out. The two of them clenched their fists and took a few deep breaths before saying loudly to Lin Wenwen, "Sorry." Only then did Lin Xiao bring in the little boy who had already wet his pants and put him on the ground. Debao. Seeing that Lin Xiao was finally willing to bring her son in, the woman immediately rushed over and squatted down to hug her son tightly. "Wah! Mommy woo-woo." At that moment, Lin Xiao looked at their hateful gazes and said lightly, "Don't blame me for not reminding you. If anything happens to one of us, I'll come after you. Let's see how you're going to keep your two kids safe. Don't think that your Yang Chao is anything." With that, her figure flickered and she disappeared on the spot. Like a ghost, he came and went without a trace. When the surrounding people saw Lin Xiao's actions, they were somewhat fearful. However, it was not only Yang Hui and his sister. Not only did Lin Xiao appear without anyone noticing, but now she had disappeared right in front of everyone. Even though there were many nature-type superhumans present, they could not sense where she had disappeared to. And from her last words, it seemed like she was not afraid of Yang Chao at all. At that moment, the woman suddenly raised her head and pointed at Lin Wenwen and the others and said to Yang Hui, "Second brother, capture them. I want them to know the consequences of touching my son." She saw that her son in her arms was trembling in fear, and there was also the smell of urine on him. A wave of hatred in her heart immediately broke through her rationality, and now all she wanted was revenge. But seeing that Lin Xiao had disappeared, she immediately wanted to make a move on Lin Wenwen and the others. "Are you done?" Suddenly, a faint voice came from the back of the crowd. Everyone turned around to look and immediately made a path for them. Then, they saw Wu Chengyue carrying Wu Yueling and walking out with a faint smile. "Yang Yin, Yang Hui, these are my guests. If you want to cause trouble, you have to look at who you're dealing with." Wu Chengyue smiled and walked to Lin Wenwen and the others. He said to Lin Wenwen, "Miss Lin, you guys can leave first. I'll deal with these people, but you guys still have to be careful in the future. After all, there might be people behind you." Lin Wenwen nodded to him. "Thank you." After saying that, she glanced coldly at Yang Yin and Yang Hui, then turned around and left with the others. Long Qingying waved her hand, and the metal cones on top of her head immediately shot to the ground a few centimeters in front of the feet of the soldiers who had their guns taken away by her. At that moment, the soldier who had followed them walked to Wu Chengyue's side, whispered a few words in his ear, and then left as well. "Wu Chengyue, it's useless even if you want to protect them. I'll let them know what it means to mess with people they shouldn't mess with." Yang Yin did not buy Wu Chengyue's words and shouted at him angrily. But seeing that Lin Wenwen and the others had left, she did not chase after them. After shouting at Wu Chengyue, she immediately carried her son and walked to her daughter who was standing there in a daze. "Yun Yun, let's go back." Yang Hui followed behind her and pulled Yang Yan's daughter to leave with her. They didn't even bother to collect the items they had placed on the stall. No one dared to touch them anyway. Wu Chengyue looked at the direction where the two groups of people left and sighed helplessly. Actually, he was just passing by the side of the corridor, but he heard a scream here, so he noticed it. So he saw a group of people gathered here, so he thought that something must have happened. But when he came over to take a look, well, he saw that the female zombie actually carried Yang Chao's nephew out of the window and looked like she was going to throw him out. Also, Yang Yin and Yang Hui both had a terrified expression on their faces. Thinking about the way these two usually did things in the past, they must have messed with them first, and that's why they were scared like this. After watching for a while, he heard the female zombie tell Yang Yin and Yang Hui to apologize to Lin Wenwen, who was standing on the side, which confirmed his thoughts. Now that he thought about what the female zombie did, it felt like an eye for an eye. Didn't you encourage children to play malicious pranks on others? Then she also played a prank. She didn't think about the consequences, whether or not Yang Chao would take revenge on Lin Wenwen and the others behind their backs. Thinking about it, Wu Chengyue said to Mingyu, "Send a few people to secretly protect these people. If there's any situation, immediately report to me." Mingyu nodded, then turned around and left. And Wu Chengyue also carried Wu Yueling and left with a few of his subordinates. Chapter 322. I told you to wear fewer skirts, but you didn't believe me. Look, we're in trouble now. Long Qingying looked at the angry Lin Wanwan and said, How would I know? I thought we wouldn't have to run around in the base like outside. I didn't expect to meet such a disgusting family and that naughty kid. Humph. Lin Wanwan said unwillingly. Suddenly, she thought of something and stopped to look around. Miss Lu, are you there? I know you're here. Thank you so much for just now. Lin Xiao appeared from the side and said to her, Be careful in places with many people in the future. You're a girl, and you're pretty. This isn't the Pluto King of Hell's base anymore. The people here won't be afraid of you. And what Wu Chengyue said was right. From now on, all of you have to be careful of that Yang. He'll definitely find a way to take revenge on us. Lin Wenwen nodded, and then I understand. At this moment, Long Qingying suddenly asked, By the way, where have you been these days? Didn't you go after Deputy Leader Yu on that day? But he said that it was Lily who went that day, not you. Lin Xiao turned around and said, I was dealing with some things in the space today, so I came out. I didn't expect to see you in trouble when I came out. Your girls, don't run around all the time. Okay? As she spoke to Lin Wanwan, she couldn't help but use the tone that she used to educate her. Oh. Lin Wanwan and Long Qingying both nodded. Then, they followed her up. When they arrived at the mission hall, they saw Chen Yuding standing in their position. He was discussing something with Lin Hao and Du Yuanxing. Huh, why are you here? Did you find someone to help? Lin Wenwen walked over and asked curiously. The people who were talking turned around and saw them coming up. Especially when they saw Lin Xiao, who hadn't appeared for a few days, they were stunned. Chen Yuding quickly reacted, then nodded and said with a smile, Oh, you're right. I did bring some people for you. Lin Wenwen's eyes lit up and asked, How many? Chen Yuding raised 3 fingers at her. 30? Lin Wenwen asked. It's 300. Lin Hao said at the side. Really? That was great. But, Captain Chen, where did you get so many people? Lin Wenwen was elated to hear this. Then, he asked doubtfully. Chen Yuding said, I didn't find them. Leader Wu sent them to you. Lin Wanwan and Lin Xiao were stunned. Leader Wu? Will he send 300 men? Chen Yuding nodded. That's great. Then we can go to work soon, right? Lin Wanwan said with a little excitement, looking at them with a pair of beautiful bright eyes. Lin Hao and the others nodded in agreement. Du Yuanxing continued, Oh, but we'll have to wait for the 5 people who came for the interview today. Or send someone to their residence to inform them. They live in the same place anyway. Lin Wenwen nodded and said, Let's go back tonight and ask Big Brother and Brother Tianqing to set the departure time, and then send someone to inform them. The others nodded. In a room on the other side of the mission office, Pu Zhatsong stood by the window, his eyes fixed on Long Qingying's figure. Who are those people over there? He asked the person behind him. The person sitting on the sofa drinking tea was Yang Hui, who had just been in the trading room. He stood up and walked to Pu Zhatsong's side. Following his gaze, he looked in that direction. Oh, they seem to be the people from the destroyed Netherworld King's base. They were just messing around with my sister in the trading room and made us lose face. Which one do you like? The one with the katana? I'm telling you, I like the one in the skirt. Don't fight with me, Yang Hui said. Pu Zhatsong licked his dry lips, his eyes full of lust and desire. He said, No, I like the one with the katana. Look at that back. How straight is it? Her temperament is so cold. I wonder if it will be different when she's being fucked by a man. TSK, I'm a little excited just thinking about it. Yang Hui said with some fear. Wu Chengyue said that those people from Netherworld King's base are under his protection. So if you want to make a move, you better not let him find anything. Otherwise, you'll have to deal with the consequences yourself. Pu Zhatsong said disdainfully. So what if he's protecting them? Isn't that Chen Yuding also under his protection? I've already fucked Chen Yuding's wife today. But she's just an ordinary woman, nothing fun. If it weren't for her big breasts, she wouldn't have lasted long. Yang Hui looked at him in surprise and said, You made a move on Chen Yuding's woman? Where is she now? Pu Zhatsong said, She's still in Area F. I gave her to my brothers to play with. Yang Hui's expression became slightly serious and said, You better not be found out. or my boss won't be able to protect you. You have to know the consequences of making a move on a woman in the base. Pu Zhutsong said carelessly. No, they won't be able to find her. When they returned at night, Lin Wenwen gave Lin Feng the list of people they recruited today and the list brought by Chen Yuding. Lin Feng took the list and nodded knowingly. Yes, when we went over at noon today. Leader Wu also told us that he would send some people over to give them to us. Each person will be given food according to their level of work. Yuan Tianqing sat on the side and said, Now there are about 350 people. We still need a few big trucks to bring them over. Then he suddenly looked at Lin Xiao, who was playing rock, paper, scissors with Xiao Lu, and said, For Miss Lu's sake, Leader Wu also helped us solve the problem of the trucks. Lin Xiao looked back at him and said in a hoarse voice, Well, he really knows how to return a favor. Lin Feng looked at her and asked curiously, By the way, when Xiao Lu awakened last time, how come it only took you one night to wake up little Lu? This time, it took you 3 days to wake up Leader Wu's daughter? Is it because she's too young? Lin Xiao said, No, it's because it's been many days since his daughter awakened. Yuan Tianqing used my lake water to suppress the progress of her awakening, but the accumulated energy was too dense. So we were afraid that his daughter's body couldn't bear it, so we could only spend more time to transfer the energy. Yuan Tianqing then said, Then when do we leave? Take the first batch of people there? Lin Feng looked at him and then at Lin Xiao. What do you think? You chose the location, so you can arrange the time. Yuan Tianqing nodded in agreement. Lin Xiao continued to play rock, paper, scissors with Lin Xiaolu and said directly, Tomorrow afternoon, we leave at 2 o'clock. Yuan Tianqing nodded and said, Okay, we can send someone to inform the previous candidates in the morning, and inform Chen Yuding. Chapter 323. Hearing Yuan Tianqing say that he would send someone to inform Chen Yuding and the others tomorrow morning, Lin Xiao said, For the first batch, I will bring Lily and Ming Ming to suppress the zombies. Then I'll have them stay there, and I'll follow you back to bring more people. The next day, everyone went out early in the morning. Mrs. Lin, Lin Xiaolu, Cheng Wangxue, and Lin Feng's family, except for Lin Wanwan who stayed in the base, went with the first group. Lin Wanwan and Long Qingying continued to follow Yuan Tianqing to recruit people in the base. They would go there after the second batch had enough people. When they arrived at the agency building, Lin Feng had Li Zheng, and the rest split up to inform the others. Early in the morning, Lin Xiao had been staring at Lin Yu until Lin Yu's hair stood on end. Only then did he secretly ask Lin Hao next to him, Why do I always feel that Miss Lu's eyes behind her sunglasses are staring at me? Lin Hao glanced at Lin Xiao and saw that Lin Xiao was also looking in Lin Yu's direction. Then he turned back and said to Lin Yu, Did you do something to her? Lin Yu shook his head and said, I didn't do anything, and today is the first time I've seen her. I've only heard about her from you guys before. As he spoke, he suddenly saw Lin Xiao walking towards him. He was so frightened that he immediately fell silent. Then, he and Lin Hao looked at Lin Xiao walking in front of them with blank and puzzled expressions. Lin Xiao walked in front of Lin Yu. This was the first time she had seen this person today. Seeing that he was with Li Zheng and the others, he guessed that they should be together. With one hand on her waist and the other on her chin, she sized Lin Yu up. He suddenly leaned over and sniffed. However, when she got closer, Lin Yu was so scared that he didn't dare to move. Lin Hao looked at Lin Xiao's actions curiously and could not help but ask, What's wrong? Is there something wrong with him? Lin Xiao retracted his nose. He looked at Lin Yu and said, I recognize you, but I remember 2 months ago, weren't you about to die? How did he come back to life? Moreover, he didn't turn into a zombie, but a psychic. She walked over and smelled his scent. Suddenly, she remembered where she had seen this man before. Wasn't this the dying man he had saved in a warehouse when he had just woken up from being a zombie and had not yet rescued Xiaobudian? She remembered that she had accidentally bitten him. At that time, this guy was almost out of breath, wasn't he? Now, he was standing in front of him, alive and well. What was going on? He did not feed him with the lake water, nor did he bring him into the lake. Logically speaking, the virus should have spread and turned him into a zombie. What was happening now? Fuck. What brought him back from the dead? Could it be that he happened to awaken his ability at the same time? Or something like that, therefore. Lin Xiao scratched his chin and thought about it. Then, he became dumbfounded again and stared at Lin Yu in a daze. His fingers were gently scratching at his chin. Lin Yu was scared silly by her words. How did this woman know that he was about to die? And he even knew that he would become a zombie? Li Zhang had given them a strict order not to tell anyone about it. Therefore, other than Li Zhang and the other four, even Lin Feng, Yuan Tianxing, and the others did not know about this. Therefore, the two of them looked at each other in a daze. Lin Hao and the others were stunned when they heard Lin Xiao's words. Lin Hao did not know the truth, so he was confused. But from Lin Xiao's words, he could guess some things. Huh. Why did Lin Yu become a zombie? Have you seen him before? Oh yeah, you also went south from City B 2 months ago. At that time, they happened to be coming here. It seems that you met on the way. He looked at Lin Xiao and asked, then turned to ask Lin Yu, "Did you get bitten?" Lin Xiao continued to stare at Lin Yu and said, "Yes, I was on the way to the south." Lin Yu was surprised and confused. He did not know how to answer Lin Hao's question. Lin Xiao asked curiously, "Oh right, do you remember that you were bitten by me at that time? My teeth are infected with a virus." Then, she pointed at Lin Yu's chest. When Lin Yu heard this, he suddenly woke up. His expression changed slightly, and then he looked at Lin Xiao with shock, surprise, and confusion. Lin Xiao was too close to him, and his emotions were exposed too much. Lin Yu immediately sensed what he was thinking, because Lin Yu's mind was thinking about the scene when he woke up in the warehouse, and his confused feelings about his situation. Lin Xiao nodded and said, "Oh, so it was like this. You woke up that night and found yourself alive again. You even hurt yourself to see if the blood was red." Lin Yu said at this time, I never knew where this tooth mark came from, but if there is a reason why I was alive again, I always think it has something to do with this tooth mark. Now that I know it was you, I am relieved." Lin Xiao was stunned, then said with a strange face, "What? My teeth can have this effect? As long as a living person is bitten by a zombie and is still breathing, can I get rid of the virus if I bite him again? Your assumption is baseless." Lin Yu said, But I didn't know anything at that time. I didn't even know what happened to me. Apart from this tooth mark, nothing changed on my body. If you didn't save me, who else could it be?" Lin Xiao scratched his chin and thought for a moment, then said, "Do you remember what time you woke up?" Lin Yu answered without hesitation, "It was 1 or 2 in the middle of the night." Lin Xiao thought for a moment and said, "Oh, I also left at 1 or 2 in the morning. I remember I brought you into the space, but I didn't do anything to you. Except that I accidentally fell on you, and then my teeth pricked you." Then he compared his own situation with Lin Yu's, and it seemed that it was really his teeth that played a role. No way. After the conversation between the two, the people next to them looked at the two of them in a daze. "You, Miss Liu, don't you have any pathogens in your teeth? Or, it only has a negative effect on people who have been infected with the virus?" After listening to the conversation between the two, Lin Hao frowned and looked at Lin Xiao with a thoughtful look. He was originally a medical student, so he was more sensitive in this aspect. Lin Xiao looked at him. "It can't be." Lin Hao looked at her with a face full of exploration and then said, "How about you try it? Find an infected animal, but it hasn't mutated or died, bite it, and then see the situation?" Lin Xiao looked at him strangely. "I will eat it directly." Lin Hao. Chapter 324. On the other side, in Wu Qingyue's house early in the morning, Wu Chengyue, Mengyu, Xiao Yunlong, Chen Yuding and others were all in the living room. Chen Yuding's expression was haggard and anxious as he paced back and forth on the empty space in front of the tea table. His eyes were bloodshot. The expressions of the others were also extremely solemn. Wu Chengyue looked at him and asked, "Are you so sure that it was Pu Zhatsong who took your lover? Do you have any evidence?" Chen Yuding shook his head and said with an angry expression, "He purposely came to look for trouble with me yesterday morning. And when he left, He said that he would definitely look for him himself. If it wasn't him, I thought, there was no one else. Everyone in the base knew that he was a pervert who liked to abuse women. Furthermore, none of the women he had played with had survived to the end. Now that my Xiao Zhan is missing, he must have done it in secret. Xiao Yunlong looked at Wu Chengyue and agreed. Maybe it really is him. Wu Chengyue nodded, then frowned and said, but we don't have any evidence. After all, he is also a deputy leader of the base. The most important thing now is to find him. Then he asked Chen Yuding, do you have any clues? Do you know where she went missing? Chen Yuding said, my team members, who were in charge of protecting little Zhan, said that they were knocked out on the way in a deserted place, and there were a lot of people on the other side. When he woke up, little Zhan had already disappeared. I sent people to search the area, but they didn't find anything. Wu Chengyue thought about it and looked at Mengyu, saying, well, I'll let Mengyu follow you to that place again. Maybe she'll find something. Mengyu nodded. Chen Yuding knew that Mengyu was Logia, so he nodded and said, all right, I can only trouble Miss Meng. Mengyu smiled and said, you're welcome. At this time, Xiao Liqing came in and said, leader, the people from the Netherworld King's base are here. Everyone in the room turned to look at Xiao Liqing. Wu Chengyue said, he must be here to inform them of the departure time. Show him in. Yes. Good morning, everyone. It was Li Zhang who came in. He had come to inform Wu Chengyue to borrow a car. When he walked in and saw Chen Yuding in the room, he was slightly surprised. Captain Chen? Why are you here at Chief Wu's place so early? He had even sent Lei Yao to Chen Yuding's house to inform him. The others went to find those who came to apply on their own. Xiao Yunlong immediately stood up and said, oh, you are here to borrow a car. The caravan is ready for you. Where do you want to meet? What time are we leaving? Li Zhang cast a puzzled look at Chen Yuding, and when he heard Xiao Yunlong's question, he turned his head to look at him and said, oh, we will leave at 2:00 this afternoon. Gather at the plaza in front of the agency building in Area D. Xiao Yunlong nodded and then said, well, then I will inform the driver to drive the car there before 2:00. Also, the 300 people on our side will directly follow the vehicles. Li Zhang smiled and nodded. Yes. Thank you, Leader Wu, for lending us your truck and manpower. Wu Chengyue shook his head politely and said, you're welcome. We are all partners, and we still need to exchange for your food. With your job, many people won't have to worry about starving to death this winter. Li Zhang nodded, then suddenly looked at Chen Yuding and said, oh yes, Captain Chen, there should be no problem with the people on your side, right? Will they all arrive at noon? I feel that you don't seem to be in a very good state right now. Did something happen? Chen Yuding said with a distressed expression, I may not be able to go with you for the time being. As he spoke, he turned his head to look at Wu Chengyue. Wu Chengyue thought for a moment, then suddenly looked at Xiao Yunlong and said, Yunlong, why don't you lead the team first? I will help deal with Chen Yuding's matter. Xiao Yunlong nodded, then walked over to Chen Yuding and patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry, I will find your wife. With that, he walked out of the door. Li Zhang looked doubtfully at Chen Yuding, but it was not appropriate for him to ask about other people's business. He had to leave first, then I'll go first. You guys go ahead. Then, he turned around and took 2 steps before he suddenly stopped and turned back. He looked at Chen Yuding and said, if you need any help, you can tell us? Chen Yuding reluctantly nodded to him. Yes? Thank you. After Li Zhang left, Wu Chengyue looked at his back. Suddenly he thought of the female zombie. Wasn't she a zombie? She must be very sensitive to the smell of people. If he asked her for help, maybe it would be faster to find Chen Yuding's lover. Thinking of this, he suddenly said to Li Zhang, who was about to go outside, please wait a minute. Li Zhang and Xiao Yunlong stopped together, looking back at him with a puzzled expression. What's the matter? Li Zhang said. Wu Chengyue asked, where is your Miss Lu? I don't know if you can ask her to come over? Li Zhang looked at him with a puzzled expression. You are looking for Miss Lu? I have to go back and ask her. Wu Chengyue said, then please go back and tell her that I have a favor to ask her. I don't know what price she needs to pay. Li Zhang nodded and said, okay, I will go back and bring your words to her. After Li Zhang left, Wu Chengyue looked at Chen Yuding and said, I have a way. If that Miss Lu is willing to help, she should be able to find where your Xiao Zhan is hidden very soon. Chun Yuding's eyes lit up and asked eagerly, Really? Wu Chengyue smiled confidently and said, She is not an ordinary person. In terms of finding people, she is probably better than Mengyu. Then he turned his head and looked at Mengyu. Mengyu looked at him with a strange expression and said, You want to use her as a military dog? She also knew that Miss Lu was the female zombie that he flashed past. Of course, she knew how sensitive zombies were to the smell of people, even more sensitive than dogs, especially such a high-level zombie. The smile on Wu Qingyue's face became unpredictable and said, Hey, don't say this in front of her. You will be out of luck, I'm telling you. Mengyu rolled her eyes at him. Qin Yuding didn't know Lin Xiao's identity, so he didn't seem to understand what they were talking about. At this time, a gray rabbit jumped down from the stairs, and then he saw Wu Yueling holding the handrail and walking down step by step. Wu Chengyue immediately turned around and walked over. Lingling, you're up? Wu Yueling saw him walking over and stood in the same place, waiting for him to pick her up. Wu Chengyue came over and held her in his arms, touching her soft hair that was messy because she just got up. Are you hungry? Let's go wash our faces and brush our teeth first, okay? Wu Yueling looked at the two people in the living room and looked back at the gray rabbit that had already jumped down. Then she nodded. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.